the Park and Recreation Board for December 18th, 2019 to order. If the secretary could please take the roll.
Commissioner Musich.
Present.
Commissioner Cogill.
Present.
Commissioner Meyer.
Present.
Commissioner Vita.
Present.
Commissioner French.
Here.
Commissioner Forney.
Here.
Vice President Hassan.
Here.
President Bourne.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Just for the record, I'll note Commissioner Severson is trying to make it tonight. He is still dealing with some recovery illness. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda with the following additions. Commissioner should have received a resolution for the full board 2019-430, which is under unfinished business, which is an agreement with Phyllis Wheatley Community Center on snow removal this winter. And then from the Admin and Finance Committee, 2019-426, there's a request to advance the board this evening a resolution for a lease agreement for the restaurant at the Lopet, and advancing from standards and conduct this evening, 2019-423, amending the rules of the board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Commissioner Meyer.
Regarding the item in the standards and conduct meeting, I don't understand why that one needs to come to the full board. So I'm going to vote against adding that one. That's something that I'd like to have a full understanding of, and I think it would be appropriate for the public to have a longer opportunity to review that.
Commissioner Meyer, are you asking to divide the question on,
Yes,
the additions of the agenda?
Yeah, I would like to divide the question, and I guess I'll vote on that one.
I'll treat that. Is there any other discussion on the agenda? If not, I'll just treat that as a second, we'll take admin and finance and 2019-430. Is there any discussion on the approval of is there any addition on the approval? We'll go into discussion on standards. And is there any, trying to think how to get this. Is there any discussion on amending the agenda before we vote to add 2019-426 and 2019-430? Seeing none, I'll take those as consent before we go to the full board. So the discussion before us is on the addition of 2019-423 to the agenda through standards and conduct. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll just add this is Commissioner Forney.
Yes, I would support Commissioner Meyer's request that to not advance that from the board in this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Forney. Seeing no further discussion, the item coming up from Standards and Conduct, amending the rules of the board, would, among other things, a change requested by our legal counsel to clarify some of the procedures that this board adopted last year around the selection of supplemental legal counsel. There's another slate of changes adding to the superintendent's responsibility, a report on a regular basis of vacancy positions and temporary detailed and temporary filled positions. I'm asking that this advance forward tonight because the board this year this will be the last in a series of amendments to our rules and our financial operating procedures that drastically increase the transparency of the way that this board operates. The reports around vacancies and detailed positions, it came to our attention during our last budget discussion that there are a number of potential violations of civil service rules with how long positions are being detailed. And I think that this is a fiduciary responsibility of the Board of Commissioners to understand where we are at with budgets that are approved. And I think it will be easier for staff to have an entire slate of new policies and financial procedures going into 2020. So that is my request to have it go forward this evening. If there's no further discussion, all of those in favor of amending the motion to approve the agenda to include 2019-423 for standards and conduct, I would ask the secretary to take the roll.
Commissioner Musich,
No.
Commissioner Cogill,
No.
Commissioner Meyer,
No.
Commissioner Vita,
No.
Commissioner French,
Pass.
Commissioner Forney,
No.
Vice President Hassan,
Yes.
President Bourne,
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
You have 3 ayes, 5 nays, 1 absent.
The motion to include standards and conduct resolution before the full board fails. Is there any question on the full agenda? Any further discussion on the full agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the agenda carries. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of December 4th, 2019.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Before moving on to reports of officers of Superintendent Bangora, I have, as an officer of the board, an announcement to make, and folks will bear with me for just a moment. After being elected to my 3rd term as a commissioner on the Minneapolis Park Board in 2017, I was asked by my colleagues to serve as the president of this board. The Park Board is a part-time elected office, but the role of president, as folks that have held this office in the past know that that's a pretty all-consuming full-time task. And while it's a daunting task, I was honored to ask to lead the board. I believe our parks are for everyone, and over the last 2 years, we've worked to make that a guiding principle and vision of this board. Together, we've worked to repair the wrongs of the past, like overturning decades of underinvestment in communities of color, restoring the name of Bede-Makaska, repealing systemically discriminatory ordinances and policies, healing our relationships with organized labor, increasing our financial transparency, and working with our neighbor and partner Graco to create a world-class park an entire generation ahead of schedule. I personally poured myself into changing our culture to ensure that everyone who deals with the Minneapolis Park Board, whether you're a card-carrying member of the NAACP, the descendants of Dakota who we currently occupy their land, or children of color interacting with our park police, are all treated with dignity and respect. Together, we've also kept our eyes on the future, and we've worked to ensure that the promise of Minneapolis is accessible to current and future generations. We've done this in part through the selection of Mary Merrill as our interim superintendent last year, and I'm very proud to say through the selection of Al Bangora as our current superintendent of parks. The hiring of the superintendent is the most solemn responsibility that this board does, and any of us sitting up here will do in our time on the board. And simply put, we couldn't have made a better choice than Superintendent Bangora. Al is a visionary leader. He's dedicated to putting the needs of our youth in the front and center of every conversation. And with Al's help, in the face of shrinking resources this year, we were able to increase youth funding this year by about $1 million, ensuring kids in our city continue to have the same opportunities that I was fortunate to have growing up in the face of shrinking resources today. Thank you, Al. Just like Theodore Wirth and Mary Merrill, Al's vision for how parks can shape our lives will be felt in Minneapolis for generations to come, and I'm proud of the role that I've had in making that come to fruition. Over the last 10 years, I've never been happier with where the Minneapolis Park Board is than I am today, and I've never been more optimistic about our future. That is why I will not accept the nomination for the presidency of the Minneapolis Park Board in 2020. As I look around, I see we're on excellent footing, and for the first time in our over 130-year history, we have an elected board that is truly reflective of the people in Minneapolis they serve. We have a board consisting of young people, of immigrants, of people of color, working moms, single dads, and youth advocates. And the best way for me to use my privilege right now is to support them in their leadership and their vision of the parks. There's still a lot of work to do, and I'm still fully committed to serving as a commissioner on the park board and for the remainder of my term and beyond. And I'm committed to supporting our next president. She or he will have to continue to fight to preserve and increase funding for our parks while increasing investment in our young people and holding the line on privatization and outsourcing of public jobs. It's a daunting task, and I know sometimes it's easier to make friends than it is to make progress, but I'm glad to say that I think most members of our board are up to that challenge. While there's more work to do, I'm also personally looking forward to restoring some of my own work-life balance, that being the full-time president of a part-time board, also working a full-time job, makes very difficult without incredible personal sacrifices. Those of you that know me know that in 2017, during my campaign to help diversify and bring progress to the Minneapolis Park Board, I lost my mother in a battle to Alzheimer's. Folks also know that just this last March, I lost my father unexpectedly. So it's really easy to turn around and wish that you spent one fewer day door knocking and one more day with the folks that you care about. But also in the middle of that tragedy, we've done some incredible things. I've met my lifetime partner, and I'm very excited to spend a little bit more time with my family, friends, and loved ones. And I also, while doing that, I know that there's ample leadership on this board to carry on in the incredible progress that we've made together. So thank you all for the support over the last 2 years, and I'm looking forward to continue to work with the board in 2020. That's the conclusion of my report of officers, Superintendent Bangora.
Thank you, President Bourne, and thank you, Commissioners, and it's hard to follow. But well said. So Superintendent update for the board. Aquatics, the Junior Swim Club will be wrapping up its 2019 season this week. Highlights include 74 youth participants, ages 7 to 17. Practices start back up on Tuesday, January 7th. If you're interested in joining the club, contact Phillips Aquatic Center. Scholarships are available. Ice arenas, athletics, and volunteers. To date, we have 232 coaches registered to coach winter sports for 2020. We continue to recruit volunteer coaches for basketball, wrestling, and hockey, and if you're interested, to contact your local recreation center. Volunteer Mike Miller at Van Cleef Park. Mike Miller has been a volunteer coach for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for the past 29 years. He has coached youth girls volleyball, softball, and basketball. His service to Van Cleef Park and Minneapolis community is beyond measure. He has touched the lives of hundreds of Minneapolis kids and their families, and we are so lucky to have Mike volunteer for us. So congratulations to Mike Miller, and as we all know in this park system, without our volunteers, we wouldn't be the premier park and recreation system in the country, and so thank you to all the volunteers that make this city great, make our park and recreation great, so thank you again. Join our golf pros and the First Tee program for winter junior golf lessons. Classes will be held once a week starting in mid-January and running through the early March. More details will be available soon. Recreation centers and program updates. Fuller partnered with other Southwest locations to submit 2 Walter Dietzig grants for 2020 for senior programming. They also hosted a gingerbread house event with 60 people in attendance. Wyndham South New Holiday Centerpiece Program, they had 6 families that attended. So some of those examples are up there, and I love seeing the gingerbread house. That pretty much happens at all of our centers, and it's really nice to see. So great work. Lyndhurst 13U girls Graff Soccer won the city championship. Whittier Rec Center received a grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization to focus on water quality and habitat programming with a new summer program, Water Leaders. Whittier teen leaders will receive training and implement their own creative project with our youth campers. Northeast and Southeast. With temperatures reaching below zero, we had 30 seniors venture out to make it to our December luncheon and enjoyed some warm Italian food. They had a holiday special meal with which was centered from Murano's Deli and a local establishment for Northeast Minneapolis. Youth development. Pop-up parks will feature some new equipment in 2020, starting with adaptive basketball hoops. The hoops are fun for all ages and abilities. Youth line. Staff attended a full social and emotional learning training offered by the University of Minnesota Extension Department. The training was focused on developing practical strategies and resources for creating learning environments and designing impactful learning experiences. Full-service community schools, quick report. Bethune registered 90 families and 317 students as Toys Tots holiday giveaway recipients. Families began receiving their gifts at 1 o'clock this afternoon. So it's just fantastic, so thank you for that. Forestry. Forestry crews braved the latest cold snap to remove nearly 100 ash trees at the Peace Garden. Knowing that edible ash borer kills all ash trees these removals will ensure that nearby paths stay safe for pedestrians. Maintenance and operations. Sorry. Ice rinks. Ice building efforts are in full swing. Many locations are moving to a double watering shift to build as much ice as possible during our current cold snap. Early season snow has introduced added complexities, but our teams are on it and working hard to get our ice rinks ready. And every morning, I look across at Lindo Farmstead and I see the wonderful work that the staff are doing out there, and it is literally a science, and it really is amazing to watch. So thank you to all of our staff and maintenance that are out there doing that work. It's really something to behold, and so I'm excited to see our skaters get out there and have fun. Snow removal. Teams are working hard and familiarizing themselves with their plowing and shovel routes for the 19 and 20 winter season. Huge thanks to the staff that worked over the Thanksgiving holiday to clear paths, parking lots, so services were not interrupted for our events and permit holders. Environmental management. Lake ice update. All Minneapolis lakes were ice covered as of December 11th. Freeze dates are recorded for 15 water bodies in Minneapolis, but Anacostia has the longest record at 50 years of ice-covered dates. Beach Ponds was the first water body to freeze on November 8th. A cold snap in early November froze many lakes, but Birch was the only one to remain frozen. Most lakes froze on December 2nd, but Anacostia and Harriet were the last lakes to freeze on December 11th. Notable unsafe areas remain on Lakes Harriet, Hiawatha, Nokomis, and Ryan, where water is actively flowing into or out of these lakes. During wintertime, construction, dewatering, water main breaks, and rain events can cause unsafe areas around storm sewer outlets. So please, the very simple thing is to be safe and to use caution and to be aware of ice is ice, and being on the lakes, it's unsafe, so please be careful. Conservation Corps Minnesota Youth Outdoor end of year summary. CCMI YOs work with the MPRB ended on December 11th. This year, youth crews, ages 15 to 18, were based out of North Commons and Powderhorn Parks. The young adult crew and their youth worked on conservation-based projects throughout the park system. March through June, the crew spent their time at Theodore Worth Parks, working on the Outdoor Heritage Grant for habitat enhancement. The remainder of the year, they worked throughout the park system on invasive species removal. So thank you to the Conservation Corps and the great work that they do. Wonderful program. Cedar Isles Master Plan. Cedar Isles Master Planning process has just begun. Planning staff is accepting Community Advisory Committee applications through January 31st, 2020. So please watch for more information. Finance. On Tuesday, December 17th, the Office of the State Auditor released the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's agreed upon procedures report. The engagement tested a sample of 10 MPRB professional service contracts and 2 MPRB pre-selected contracts. The review found no instances of non-compliance with the test performed. The report is available on the Office of the State Auditor's website and will be included in the board's January 8th, 2020 petitions and communications. I know it's probably not as exciting, but that is wonderful news for us, and great work by our finance department, and just proud of that. So I'm excited for the next one. The last thing I need to bring up is our new Director of Asset Management. So is Jeff Evanson there? If you can please stand up, it'd be great. Please welcome Jeff Evanson as our new Director of Asset Management. Jeff comes to us from the City of Maple Grove Parks and Recreation Board, where he served as Superintendent of Parks and Planning for the past 3 years. As superintendent, he managed all asset rehabilitation projects and the implementation of the cartograph and asset management program. He also worked with maintenance staff to gain efficiencies and provide a higher level of service for park users. Prior to his work with the City of Maple Grove, Jeff served as the park superintendent for the City of Roseville, where his accomplishments included implementing the Roseville Park and Recreation Renewal Program and an extensive natural resource restoration program, along with the rehabilitation projects and a reorganization of the Park Maintenance Division. Jeff began his career as a co-worker of the Creekside Landscaping, a design-build landscape construction company, after earning a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture at the University of Minnesota. Jeff will be a great addition to the Environmental Stewardship Division and the entire MPRB organization. With his experience and expertise as a complement to the existing knowledge and experience within the Asset Management Department, I am truly excited about the future of the Environmental Stewardship Department. I also like to wish and extend a special thanks to Brent Caith for serving as the Asset Management's interim director, and to the park operations managers who also stepped up to lead the department during the recruitment period. Their leadership was integral in getting us to this point. So thank you, congratulations, we're so excited to have you here. And of course, thank you to all of the management team and the work they did interim till you got here. So welcome, and I'm excited to be working with you, and congratulations. You're welcome. And with that, President Bourne and Commissioners, that's it for now.
Thank you, Superintendent Bangor. Are there any questions of the superintendent's report? Seeing none, moving on, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda, items 2019-412 through 2019-418.
So moved.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the consent agenda carries. Chair Vita.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I would like to move Resolution 2019-399, a resolution accepting and approving the revised Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board financial management policies effective January 1st, 2020.
The resolution is moved. Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Meyer.
I'm just concerned about the administrative burden that this would put on staff and potentially slowing down a number of projects. So for context, this is the change that would reduce the threshold at which the board reviews contracts from $100,000 down to, I believe it's $2,500. Or what it?
50,000?
No,
25,000? Oh, 100,000 to 25,000.
25,
1,000.
2,500, right?
2,500.
President Bourne, my apology. It's down from 100,000 to 2,500.
So that means a lot more contracts would come to the board on our consent agenda. I believe the number, if it had been done last year, would have been well over 100 more contracts added. I just think that that's going to be a burden on staff to add all of those, and will also slow down a lot of contracts, especially in the target market program, for those small businesses that don't always have everything together on short notice. I don't necessarily know exactly where I think the threshold should be. Like it used to be 50,000. The board recently raised it to 100,000. At the city, the threshold at which they review contracts is 175,000. But I do think $2,500 is probably too low, and that it's going to slow down a lot of small contracts that I trust our staff to take care of. So for those reasons, I'm going to be voting no on this at this time.
Is there any further discussion? I'll just, seeing no further discussion, I'll just add the revisions to our financial policies came after 2 years of discussion with this board on how to increase transparency and increase accountability. There were some pretty high profile, I think at some point during the last 2 years, every commissioner has had some reservation about the transparency of some professional service agreement that has come through the board. Again, I'm really proud of the fact that during our last audit, we intentionally selected some of the most high-profile contracts, and nothing, there were no violations of any policy. We went even further and hired went into an agreement with the state auditor's office to review some other high-profile professional service agreements, and found very similar findings that our staff are doing professional work. That said, some of the things that did come up in that report that commissioners will be seeing is that there might not be enough conflict of interest policies available for folks that are signing those professional service agreements. And some of the ones that we tested said that there were no violations, but there were some pretty high profile percentages. Additionally, the way our professional service agreements work right now is that they can all be added to consent. And it wouldn't cause any more of a stoppage. It would only cause the stoppage that commissioners chose to create. If commissioners are comfortable with the items coming through consent, they can move forward rather rapidly. One of the other concerns that I've had for 10 years on this board with having 2 levels of thresholds, when we had a threshold of $50,000, there were a lot of what park watchers at the time called $49,999 specials, where the superintendent had authority to sign those contracts. I don't think that there were anything wrong with what were signed, but they became political footballs for folks. We raised that level to $100,000, and we have seen an incredible increase of $100,000 contracts. So whatever we set that level at, you're going to see an incredible number of that dollar level. And the last thing I will say to that is it's just good practice. This is a governance and an oversight board, and I would encourage commissioners to, whenever possible, err on the side of transparency. So that said, all those in favor of Resolution 2019-399, I'll ask the Secretary to take a roll.
Commissioner Musich,
No.
Commissioner Cogill,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
No.
Commissioner Vita,
No.
Commissioner French,
Yes.
Commissioner Forney,
Nope.
Vice President Hassan,
No.
President Bourne,
Aye.
Commissioner French.
No.
You have 2 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 absent.
Resolution 2019-399 fails. Chair Vita.
On behalf of President Bourne, it's 5:30.
It's 5:30. Thank you, Chair Vita. 5:30, we are moving into open time, which is our public comment period for the Minneapolis Park Board. At every meeting of the Park Board, we entertain members of the public to testify before the board, to draw our attention to any item that you would like to make sure that the board is paying attention to. There are 2 pieces that we ask that we don't receive public comment on, and those are items of pending litigation and personnel issues. Those issues are important, and the board does want to hear your opinions on those, but the best way to bring that information forward is through contacting us through we can each be contacted individually on our website, which is minneapolisparks.org. I have The park board will also not tolerate discriminatory or harassing comments towards anyone, so I just ask that folks maintain that thought in their mind while they're giving their comments. I have 8 speakers signed up for open time. I will allocate up to 3 minutes per speaker. My first speaker is Elizabeth Ashbrook. Elizabeth, are you here this evening? Elizabeth, if you could state your name and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Okay, my name's Elizabeth Ashbrook. My address is 5100 Irving Avenue South, Minneapolis. I am a Minneapolis homeowner and resident in Lyndhurst for 25 years, within a block or two of the Parkway. So I'm very interested and aware of the plans to change traffic through Lyndhurst, and the reason I'm here tonight is first to encourage the board to support Commissioner Bourne's resolution to modify the CAC from changing traffic on the Parkway. I can't help but wonder, I don't know if any of you have received emails or any contact from me. I know, Commissioner French, you called me, we had a nice conversation a couple of weeks ago. But this issue is more than just personal interest. Although my house is directly impacted, being on West 51st Street, I'm one of 5 houses that would see 2,000 more cars go by my house daily. I'm also a block, within half a block of an intersection at 51st and James Avenue South, near Mount Olivet Church and Burroughs School. That would be a disaster for that amount of traffic to be at that intersection on a regular basis. 51st and James Avenue South, in case you don't know, sits lower, it's on the creek. There's no visibility at that intersection for pedestrians, specifically children. There are thousands of children daily who are going to school and to church. Pedestrians, bicyclists alike, are at risk from trying to cross that street. So I'm not quite sure how this design came into being, that we would have traffic and a bike path go from the Parkway at West Minnehaha along 51st to James. But it's a risk. It's a public safety issue that I've been trying to draw attention to at CAC meetings for months. I don't get feedback. My neighbors, I'm speaking not only on behalf of myself, but neighbors and residents who are concerned as well. And this is not an anti-bike petition whatsoever, but I'm here tonight to make sure that all of you have received my feedback, our feedback from the neighborhood. I've got a petition with 750 signatures and over 300 comments, all strongly against this change. So I just want to make my point clear tonight, and that I'm supporting the resolution, and that I hope that we don't have to go through this again. It's been a tedious, torturous process to understand how this process works, and to spend 9 months on a design that is a public safety issue. It defies common sense. So I'll leave it at that. If any of you need that petition with signatures, I'm happy to send it again. I don't know how to get it into the official record. Email's enough?
Elizabeth, if you're concluded with your comments, I can.
Yes.
Thank you for speaking. If you'd like to send that to Don Summers, can give you your contact information, and it'll be included in the public record.
Thank you.
Send it to her.
Okay.
Thank
you for your time.
Our next speaker is Andrew Sibberman. Andrew, are you here this evening? Andrew Sibberman. Tony Kelly. Tony, if you would come forward, state your name, and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Thank you, President Bourne, members of the board, superintendent. I come before you as the relatively recent new business manager for City Employees Local 363. We represent park keepers, arborists, and a number of other titles here at the park board, as well as folks from 9 other agencies around the metro. We are the only public sector local for the laborers in Minnesota. And altogether, we represent over 11,000 people in the state of Minnesota. Today, we're talking about the Downtown Commons Park and how and what the future of this park looks like. I urge you to be consistent with maintenance practices across an entire system and maintain that park, if it's handed over to this board, as any other park, and let my folks serve it with pride and access to opportunity that they have everywhere else. It's really about the future. It's about the future of this park. It's about the future of other parks. And it's about the future of the people of Minneapolis to have access to great jobs with negotiated benefits, with retirement packages, and with great amenities that people of Minneapolis truly deserve. So please think about this as you're thinking about this new asset and other new assets. Behind me are some of the stewards and officers of Local 363. They work at agencies all throughout the metro area. They're very proud of what they do. I want more opportunity for these folks and for the next generation of people who are going to take care of our public spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Our next speaker is Karen Peterson. Karen, are you here this evening? Karen, if you could come forward, and if you're comfortable, if you state your name and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have up to 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Do my best. I'd like everybody a little bit of a cold. My name is Karen Peterson. I live at 215 Broadway Street Northeast. And I am calling about kind of a number of issues. The overall thing is, well, first, President Bourne, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. My comments might be wide-ranging, but the overall basic message is that I believe there it goes, the MPRB and CAC should reflect the will of the people, and actions on the funding should the money spent should reflect that. The priorities for residents is to preserve our fragile urban ecology, especially as our city grows more and more dense and we're losing trees. So green space is vital, and we must be protecting our old growth trees. Especially in our funding, there I go, funding again. Apologies. Planting more trees, encouraging more. The priorities should be funding the forestry, fully funding the forestry department and the arborist positions. I was trying to get at. Other priorities associated with preserving our natural spaces, planting more trees, encouraging more pollinator gardens wherever possible, creating bird-friendly habitat, and militantly opposing any conversion from green space to impermeable surfaces. Climate change is real, coming fast, and we must be ever more militant about our intentions of where we're going and what we're trying to save. The tree canopy is disappearing. We must be thinking about when any development coming in. I see the old growth trees and developments that are going lot line to lot line, so there is no room to plant trees. I have to take this into account. So that's where I get to the fully funding the arborist and the forestry department. So I guess that's basically my point, is saying that for priorities, and I fully agree that Minnehaha Parkway needs to be left alone. As Fair Oaks Park, leave the oaks alone. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sorry, I feel like Mike Brady here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Our next speaker is Walker Reese. Walker, are you here this evening? Walker, if you could come forward, state your name, and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Walker Reese, and I live at 1117 West 26th Street in Minneapolis. Thank you, President Bourne and Commissioners. I'm here regarding Resolution 2019-419. Basically, the resolution reads, maintain the continuity of the parkway for motorists, and adding that to the CAC plan. I oppose this because maintaining continuity for motorists does not happen in a vacuum, but instead it comes at the expense of everyone else using the park by any means other than driving. So given that there are numerous other routes for motorists in the immediate area, but there are no other stretches of parkland, I urge the Commission to respect the decision of the CAC and vote no on this resolution. There are countless other examples of traffic calming measures that do not increase traffic on surrounding streets from New York to Seattle. And calming traffic is the best decision, I think, for the safety of the park and for the climate of the park. Thank you.
Thank you, Walker. Next speaker, Mary Markle. Is Mary Markle here? Former Council President Paul Ostro. Is Paul Ostro here? Johnny Hayden. Mike Lynch. Mike, are you here this evening? I'm actually, that's all. Okay. Chesney Enquist. Chesney, are you here this evening? Chesney, if you can come forward, state your name, and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Thank you. Chesney Enquist. I'm a Minneapolis resident. I'm here as a member of a community network organizing for many years to support the parks and facilitating a transition to regenerative land care practices. This includes eliminating the introduction of toxic chemicals that harm the ecosystems, which are the necessary foundation of safe, healthy parks for all. At the basis of this transition is the need to dismantle institutionalized colonialism inherent in the use of pesticides and to restore land rights to the Dakota people. I'm here to commend the work of the Pesticide Advisory Committee and to reflect the need for a community engagement process to inform the PAC on biological and racial equity measures similar to what was called for while drafting the Urban Agriculture Activity Plan. What I've witnessed as an active member of the public who has attended nearly all of the PAC meetings over the last year is primarily that PAC members are developing a critical understanding and response to the community's reminder that the obligation to endure gives us the right to know. As the technical experts who are calculating the risk of exposure to toxic biocides and asking the public to bear the burden of those risks, the PAC is called to provide accurate data in order to fully inform the public's decision about whether they'd like to continue to assume the risks of exposure to toxic pesticides. The PAC is recognizing that offering the public subjective details about Minneapolis Park's pesticide use, such as, we don't use that much, we don't use them where kids play, and we use less than before, is not adequate, especially where well-documented evidence suggests otherwise. Additionally, I see the team of appointed technical experts on public and private land care is conducting a robust, thoughtful, and heartfelt conversation around short-term alternatives and exploring and preparing to guide ongoing efforts to educate staff and community member on feasible long-term solutions. The team's co-chair, appointed by President Bourne, is adept at facilitating community-led process to effectively develop consensus around the community's recommendations for public policy pertaining to food sovereignty, land access, and environmental justice. There is a need to appoint committee members who are available to participate routinely and who are committed to engaging in broader outreach to inform equitable, sustainable, and community-driven outcomes. There is a need for representation of wider-ranging values around our relationship to land stewardship and our understanding of the ongoing impacts of systemic pollution on underserved communities. These are the factors that I will hold myself accountable to, this board, the staff, and the community. Thank you again, Commissioners, for your unanimous decision to establish this committee nearly a year ago, to staff for genuinely supporting this body of work. I hope you are as eager as I to receive tonight's report as a positive indicator of the committee's formation and promising development.
Thank you, Ms. Enquist. Circling back, has Andrew Sibberman, is he here? No, I'll keep going. Bill Schroyer. Bill, are you here this evening? Bill, if you could come forward, state your name, and if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have up to 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Hi, Bill Schroyer, 3856 38th Avenue South, Minneapolis. I just ended a 19-year career working for the Minneapolis Park Board as a arborist and as a park keeper. So I do have to say, protect the trees and protect the tree preservation positions, tree cop. We need it. We're losing over 40,000 public trees to emerald ash borer. We need to protect that part of the budget. Also on the Commons Park and the talk of outsourcing jobs, I really feel that outsourcing jobs is a pathway to disaster. I see people downtown, the Downtown Improvement District, those people do not have career jobs. They're underpaid, they don't have maybe pensions or health insurance at the same level that we do. The Commons was actually a poorly designed system set up in the beginning. It basically came off as a subsidy for a $1 billion stadium. And we should provide staffing if we get the opportunity to take that over as a Minneapolis park. The lawsuit by Paul Ostrow was one that I felt was timely, and as it comes to its conclusion, take that very seriously, that outsourcing the jobs is not a good move. Basically, the full-time staff, members of like 363, the City Employees Union, I'm a retiree member of that union. And we have a lot of pride and a lot of skill, experience, and that commitment is what we need to protect that asset. That's a huge asset. It's downtown. It's high visibility. We need to hold those jobs as instead of outsourcing. I also want to say one real quick thing about the Minnehaha Trails CAC. I was on that, and I saw some of the outrage by homeowners and citizens about closing what was the grand rounds. The grand rounds was something that the park board had spent planning and money on for decades. And when we finally get the grand rounds completed, to close that off just seems completely counterproductive. And the 750 signatures on that petition would tend to show that. So main point, don't let the commons be outsourced. Your city employees, full-time people are going to do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schroyer. Our final speaker that I have signed up is Michael Gloss. Michael, are you here this evening? Michael, if you can come forward, state your name, if you're comfortable, your address for the public record. You have 3 minutes to address the board, and welcome.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Michael Gloss. My address is 1200 Nicollet Mall, and I'm here to address the issue of continuity on the Minnehaha Parkway. And it was brought to my attention that there's a move to maintain continuity, which means to keep the traffic flowing all the way around the parkway. And while that may solve a traffic problem for people trying to use their cars to get around town, what it does raise is a noise pollution problem. I live in Loring Park, and we have great parks. I use the Loring Greenway, walk to the Loring Park, which is fantastic inner city park, but the problem is that in Loring Park, you are drowned out by the noise from Hennepin and the highway. And that's vehicle traffic, which is something that can be predicted based on the volume and speed of the vehicles. It's within our control to reduce vehicle noise. Being in a big urban city, there's going to be a lot of noise pollution, and it's nice to be able to escape that by using our parks. We like to use the parks. I like to use Minnehaha Parkway, specifically the running trail. My favorite parts are where it's quiet. So where the park dips down and it's below the road, you can't hear anything. And I like that aspect of it. As well, when you run down to the river, you're down the creek below the falls, and it's silent. It's a sanctuary. And I think one thing as a transit and walker and biker, I biked here today, a lot of us don't come to these meetings. I represent far more than just myself. And one thing is that people who use transit and walk to these places, we don't have means necessarily to get outside the city to experience quiet. We're not going up to Boundary Waters necessarily. And so we need inner city sanctuaries from noise pollution. I think our parkway is one place that we can really give that part of the city as a sanctuary to its citizens of all income levels. And I think it's really disservice to have a lot of noise pollution on there from continuity of vehicle traffic. Thank you very much. I really think the Minneapolis Park District is one of the best park districts in the country, and I'd like to see us improve that even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gloss. Is there anybody that had signed up for open time to testify whose name I hadn't called? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm closing open time, going back to Chair Vita on the Admin and Finance Committee.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I'd like to move Resolution 2019-400, a resolution awarding a construction contract to Kilmer Electric Company, Inc. in the amount of $443,690 for Elliott Park Phase 2 field and pedestrian lighting improvements per bid event number 609, pending approval by City of Minneapolis Procurement Division and Civil Rights Department, and authorizing administrative use of a 10% construction contingency upon the $44,369,000 for necessary construction change orders that may arise with the contract, and amending the 2019 capital improvement plan to include $144,759 from the Elliott Park neighborhood portion of the Parkland Dedication Fund.
Resolution has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
2019-400 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Chair Vita.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-402, a resolution approving Amendment Number 3 to Professional Services Agreement Number C 41161 with Damon Farber Associates related to the Waterworks mezzanine phase in the amount of $190,415 for a new contract total of $3,648,803.02.
Resolution has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. Chair Vita.
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-410, a resolution of, oh,
Not your committee. Planning. It's
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Go to
okay.
Chair Foreman.
On behalf of the Planning Committee, I'm going to move Resolution 2019-410, sorry, resolution approving an updated easement agreement with the City of Minneapolis that realigns and reduces the area of a water main easement within Curry Park.
Resolution 410 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on 2019-410? Seeing none, I would ask the secretary to please take the roll.
Commissioner Musich.
Aye.
Commissioner Cogill.
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Vita.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
Aye.
Vice President Hassan.
Aye.
President Bourne.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes, 1 absent.
The resolution carries. Chair Forney.
I would like to move Resolution 2019-411, a resolution requesting staff to prepare and submit to the Planning Committee by its first regular meeting in 2020, a process of further engagement aimed at quantifying and discerning support of the water play feature to be included in Victory Park.
2019-411 has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I just have one clarifying question for Assistant Superintendent Schroeder on Commissioner Severson's behalf. He's not here with us tonight. The Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, just for clarification, going back to the public, I know in the master plan that we had approved, call for a splash pad. I think Commissioner Severson has gotten considerable feedback on also interest in a wading pool. This going back is weighing both of those options, correct? So staff may come back with one or the other. Is that
President Board and Commissioners, it's why we frame this as support of the water play feature, so that we're not favoring one versus the other.
fantastic? Thank you. So seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of 2019-411, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. I will go into, I'm going to take these out of order and go into Resolution 2019-430, a resolution authorizing the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to enter into an agreement for services related to snow removal within the leased premises as defined in a ground lease between the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board and Phyllis Wheatley Community Center, Incorporated, with such leased premises located generally at 1301 10th Avenue North. Is there a motion? Is there a motion for 2019-430?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Resolution 2019-430 has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. I'd just like to request that staff tell us what this measure is about and why it didn't go through committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I think Assistant Superintendent Barrick can give a little bit of background. I can give some additional background. Assistant Superintendent Barrick.
President Bourne, Commissioners, this came to us as a request to put together an agreement with Phyllis Wheatley to provide their snow removal. So they currently own the building and lease the land in which the building sits on parkland. It is adjacent to a park, and so they had been providing their own snow removal, And then at the start of this year, they made the request that we provide their snow removal. I have a aerial, and I would invite Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, if I'm missing anything, I would welcome, in case there's more that should be. But while I'm waiting, we do have an aerial to kind of guide, give you an idea of the property. We currently plow the paths adjacent to the leased area. So here's, the parkland that we currently plow, the exterior paths, and we do some of these interior paths. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. But then the hatched area is the leased area, which is the parking lots and sidewalks leading up to the building. And so, as we put in the background, the parking lot, adding the parking lot, it would be one additional parking lot to our current plowing operation, which is about 109 parking lots, so this would put us at 110. The exterior paths would just be extended. We currently have someone going through there with a smaller piece of equipment to clear the exterior paths. The piece we have to figure out would be the sidewalks and paths closest to the building, where we typically do that by hand. And so in our parks, we typically have people bid into the buildings, meaning someone is assigned to work there, and we have shovels and sand and salt and the equipment on site, and they report to work there, and they do the hand removal. In this case, we would probably have to find a way to add this to a route. And so a mobile crew that goes around and does, which we have mobile crews that go around and do hand shoveling. We would add this to their route. So with the action being authorization to enter into developing this agreement, we kind of outline what we have to figure out, and in figuring that out, we would be able to derive a cost that would need to be recovered for having the park board provide these services to the lease, because as the current lease is written, it's their responsibility to provide those services.
Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Barrick. I have a feeling you might want to stay up at the dais. Commissioner Meyer, you still have the floor. I see you turn your light on.
Yeah. Just a quick question. I don't think it's an issue for us to do this one time. I'm just concerned about doing this a lot, because and the question I have is, like, the money that we get from this, would that go to hire new people, or would it basically mean that they're going to be slower getting to other snow clearing priorities throughout the city?
President Bourne, Commissioner Mayor, I don't think it'll be enough money to hire a full-time FTE. So at this point, it would be in addition to the work they already have. I think that, and that's why we put the 1% in there, that it's literally adding one more parking lot to the route. There is a tipping point at some point. Unfortunately, we don't know that. So we see this as, we could take this on. We know it's going to be an impact. How much of an impact, it'll depend on the details in terms of, by what time does this building need to be cleared. So as familiar with our priorities right now when we do snow removal, are opening up, simultaneously opening up our parking lots at our Rec Plus sites, as well as our regional trails. And so this would be treated probably similar to a Rec Plus site, meaning we would need to get there first thing so that they can be up and operating. And that is kind of why we're asking for this permission to enter into exploring the agreement, because it is a different animal.
Yeah, so as you know well, snow clearing is a high priority for me. I don't think signing on to one contract will hinder us very much on that. I don't want to have that be a really irregular thing, though, so I just wanted to put that on the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Before I go to Commissioner French, I just have a couple of clarifying questions and a little bit of context for Commissioner Meyer as to why this is being brought forward. Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, you pointed out on the map that we are already doing some plowing adjacent, right? So we think, and there's a difference in understanding, and I'll get back to that context in a second, but we think it is Phyllis Wheatley's responsibility to plow the area that is blue, that is highlighted on the map here. And we're currently plowing the remainder of the lot along 10th Avenue, is that right? Or which pieces are we plowing right now?
So I know for sure, and I'll look to Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, but I know for sure the perimeter paths that you see in the parkland, and then that internal path that's kind of below that number 600. But as for the building that's labeled 917 in that parking lot, I'm not sure if that's school or
President Bourne, Commissioners, that's not our property, so we're not maintaining that.
So the rest of the areas that we are plowing, what type of equipment is used for that?
So currently at this site, it would be small, like a holder or the tool cats with a plow doing the perimeter paths, maybe a 4x4 truck. Kind of depends on the width of the path, what piece of equipment and the routes. We set the routes, but sometimes you have to make adjustments. And
So somebody drives there to do that work with the equipment that they need, is that right?
Yep, along a route, using that piece of equipment to continue to clear. They don't necessarily stop and get out and do some shoveling too.
Okay.
That may be something we could potentially do,
Okay.
but that's what, the way things are set up now is kind of the equipment is set up to a route that matches what that route can sustain or what that route requires. So if it's a 4x4 truck, we have it go through and clear this path. And there are some instances then where we can't get a 4x4 truck on the same property, but we have the holder or a smaller piece of equipment coming through, and they'll also do another section of the park.
Thank you. I think that there's an interest of reducing our carbon footprint. I think that there is an efficiency of scale of if we are having somebody drive over to this park and do this work, it doesn't make sense to have, at least in the short term, to have another vendor come to drive to this park to do work that is adjacent to the work that we're already doing. Just a little bit of historical context as to why this is coming forward tonight. Phyllis Wheatley has been through an incredible amount of transition in the last couple of years. And I think that probably leads to their past practice of clearing the lot. And I actually do think our agreements are pretty clear that it is their responsibility to clear this lot. Wanting to give our friends and neighbors the benefit of the doubt and some assistance in transition while they're working with staff to better understand the lease that their predecessor signed about 10 years ago. They still have to clear the snow and get some room and make sure the kids can get into their center. So this is a stopgap measure through this season while we're doing it. I think it's a neighborly thing. They're going to reimburse us for our time, but it's not my intent that unless there's some sort of other agreement that we come to that might be more efficient, I don't see doing this past this winter, and I think it's just something to be a good neighbor, and they're trying to get their lots cleared now. So, and we have the ability to do it. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Barrick. Commissioner French.
I guess some of those questions were already answered. Do we have a dollar amount of how much more extra it would cost for the snow removal? Like if you guys calculated how many dollars as far as labor costs?
So President Bourne, Commissioner French, at this point, we've got a rough estimate of cost per square foot that includes time, equipment, et cetera. I literally got them this afternoon, and it's an estimate, and so I haven't sat down with Jeff to unpack it and make sure that the numbers are accurate.
Is it nominal, or is it?
Per square foot, it's less than 50 cents a square foot. And the square footage on this site, I think, is in the neighborhood of 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. So you're looking at a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 per time.
Okay.
So,
and the only reason I'm saying that is Phyllis Wheatley is an institution in Minneapolis, so I don't have a problem with entering an agreement with folks who provide an awesome service to our community. I would encourage my other commissioners to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Seeing No further discussion. All those in favor of 2019-430, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion carries. I would entertain a resolution for 2019-419, a resolution modifying the charge of an appointed community advisory committee for the Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan. Is there a motion? It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. Before we debate on this too much, I was wondering if it'd be possible for us to get an update on where the Minnehaha Creek master planning process is at from staff.
I'm looking for Director Arvidsson.
President Bourne, Commissioner Musich. We last night held CAC meeting number 10, and the purpose of that meeting was to discuss a variety of topics that were not actually related to the road, because we, a month ago, had a series of open houses, or we had an open house and a CAC meeting specifically to discuss the road on the heels of a traffic study being released. And then prior to that, we had taken about a 6-month hiatus in the project. So we've kind of started up again and are continuing to work through the CAC recommendation process. I would say simultaneous to the meeting that happened last night, which looked at some older designs for certain portions of the creek that had not yet been discussed. We are continuing as a design team to iterate new designs based on the feedback that we've been hearing on the Parkway Road itself, and also based on the data included in the traffic study that was commissioned and then executed. We expect to have new designs for the community to react to in January, and we're working to schedule another CAC meeting in January. We're just in the midst of finalizing that date. So we will continue to have those community conversations until our CAC is ready to make a recommendation to this board. But at the moment, as we do, we are continuing to modify designs in response to that community engagement and to iterate those designs based on what folks are telling us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Meyer?
I had some
Oh, go.
questions. I had some
Commissioner Musich.
additional comments. Thank you, Adam. I don't have any additional questions for you. So this is a project that's happening both in my district and in the 6th Park District, and I would just like to ask that whoever our future leadership is, that when there are resolutions coming before the board that impact commissioner districts specifically, that every commissioner involved in that work be consulted. Because I did not realize that this would be coming before the board until I saw it come forward on our agenda on Saturday, which was disappointing. I've heard a lot from my constituents and others' constituents on this particular topic, and I won't be able to support it. I believe strongly in our Community Advisory Commission process to engage community power and to let the public and the design teams work together towards plans that really demonstrate what they want rather than what's politically popular for us to do. So rather than engaging in political interference in that public process, I'd rather see us vote this down and allow them to continue their work and bring forward a plan. And if at that time we feel that the plan that's been brought forward does not reflect the will of the people, that would be the time for us to make a different decision. So I won't be able to support this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. I also will not be voting for this motion today. My understanding is that the CAC's goal on this was to try to make the Parkway less of a commuter route, which has always been the goal of our parkways. The idea behind them is, if you were trying to get somewhere, then you were doing it wrongly. And in this part, or in the western part of the Parkway, 50th Street is capable of handling that traffic and is the more appropriate place for commuters to be going. A lot of the people that have reached out to me seem to have a mistaken understanding of what the CAC had been discussing, because they keep talking about closing it off to traffic altogether when it would not have been doing that. It would simply be diverting the traffic off at certain points and trying to push like commuters who are trying to get through quickly onto 50th Street. But the entire parkway would still be accessible by vehicle. It just wouldn't be as direct as previously. So, I also think that we should respect the work of the CAC. And my understanding is also that they were already moving in the direction that this amendment pushes them to. But I think we should, give them the chance to come to us and tell us what their thoughts are. And if people want to vote it down at that time, they can. But I think this is the wrong time to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner French.
I've got a huge amount of emails and phone calls about this issue. I believe that we have way too many cars on the road. I'll be the first one to say that. I think we need to change how we get to work every day and how we move around the city. But I also understand that people bought houses in that area 30, 40 years ago, and they didn't plan when they bought those houses. They didn't understand that 20, 30 years down the line that the traffic would be changed or diverted or just different. I'm concerned about people with disabilities who won't be able to maneuver through these certain areas and go places. I just don't think this has been thought out enough. I think we can have some broader conversations maybe later, and I think maybe we need to get to those what do you call it, the stages of grief and like denial and all that stuff. They let people kind of mosey into the system of not having cars everywhere. Like that's a tough one for a lot of people, and I think we need the folks who want to shut the parkway down maybe need to go have conversations with their neighbors and explain exactly what they want and what they need and what's good for the community, and then come back to us. But right now, I'm going to support this motion because I don't think the people in that neighborhood have been contacted and supported. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Commissioner French. I have a couple of just staff questions for Assistant Superintendent Schroeder. I might have some specific on this one for Director Arvidsson as well, but just some general CAC history questions for the Assistant Superintendent. The board, I want to make sure I understand the history on this one right, but I have a recollection of this board taking this is a pop quiz. I have a recollection of this board taking a vote to modify the charge for the Hiawatha Golf Course CAC during the last 2 years. Is my recollection right?
President Bourne, the CAC for the Hiawatha Golf Course did request the board consider a change to its charge.
Okay.
It was the CAC in that case requesting the change.
Was that change approved to the letter of their request?
No.
Okay.
It was not.
So I think that's my only historic question. So this, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Schroeder. So this board does have a history of when we as elected leaders are leading and feel that we might be on the verge of making the wrong choice for the community. We come in and we lead and we modify charges from time to time. We've done that during this term on at least one occasion. We've done that more times than I can remember in my previous 2 terms. It's a common course of action. I don't think it sets a precedent when we know what the right decision is. I'm more convinced that this is the right decision at this point, that it is the same decision that it sounds like our staff and our CAC are getting towards. There's a lot of really good work happening in this CAC, and there's a lot of really concerned neighbors that may throw out the good work with the bad sooner than later. I think the CAC's time would be better spent looking at other pieces of traffic mitigation along the parkway, but diverting traffic forcing traffic off the roads does little more than turn Minnehaha Parkway into a private driveway for the folks that live along the parkway, because their cars would still need to have access. And that really concerns me. The parkway is for everyone, and I'm not really interested in creating a publicly subsidized private driveway along the creek for some of the most affluent people in the city of Minneapolis. And I think our desires seem to be in line in that case. So I have seeing no further discussion. All of those in favor of, I'd ask for a roll call on 2019-419.
Commissioner Musich.
No.
Commissioner Cogill.
No.
Commissioner Meyer.
No.
Commissioner Vita.
No.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
Commissioner Forney.
No.
Vice President Hassan.
No.
President Bourne.
Aye.
You have 2 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 absent.
2019-419 fails. Moving on to recess of the regular meeting to move to, I believe it is the Committee on Legislative and Intergovernmental Relations. The Secretary will note I will be appointing myself to all of Commissioner Severson's committees this evening.
Do you want to do the Pesticide Advisory Committee?
Oh, do we have a report from the Pesticide Advisory
Yeah.
Committee still?
They're under the discussion.
Thank you. For discussion items, we have an update from the Pesticide Advisory Committee.
President Bourne, Commissioners, want to thank you and thank the co-chairs, Russ Henry and Mike Lynch. We were last in front of you, I believe, April 3rd, and I'll turn it over to them to give you the full update, but we thought it'd be a good time to come back and kind of recap some of the work that this committee's been up to, talk about some of the next steps. One of the things that we also want to talk about was a committee composition. So we've had a few vacancies. We've had a couple of people resign after the initial recommendations were made. We've had a new appointment. Commissioner Severson had a new appointment, Rachel Augusta. And then we have 2 vacancies in Commissioner Vita's district and Commissioner Cogill's district, and then 1 staff vacancy. The Community Outreach Department here at the Park Board has solicited applications. I believe the application period closes today or tomorrow. We've received several. We've actually received many. Once we have that, we will be presenting those applicants to the commissioners and asking for appointments. The only one that will come before you for approval will be the staff appointment. So that's what you can kind of expect, and one of the things we wanted to encourage were those appointments. And so with that, then I will turn it over to these 2 gentlemen to walk you through some of the work the committee's done and where we're currently at.
President Bourne, Commissioners, thank you very much for having us here this evening. Our Pesticide Advisory Committee for the Parks has been very busy. We're 1 year into meetings now, and we've had a very active crew. Committee members have been very engaged, and then we've had a lot of public feedback coming to the committee as well. So some of the things that our committee has worked on, you're very familiar with, such as the ban on glyphosate and how to support staff in moving past the use of glyphosate after the moratorium was implemented. So we have interviewed staff and had them in to present to us from golf, from gardening staff, we've had forestry staff, we've had all kinds of staff members come in and really help us understand how we can help them with recommendations.
The wrong presentation, so. The wrong presentation is up on the slideshow, so.
It's okay, I know what I want to talk to you guys about. And recently, as Jeremy said, we have been looking forward to some new appointments from the board in order to round out our team and help us out. I came tonight to talk to you about the IPM policy. And We have currently got an IPM policy that staff has asked our committee to review because it doesn't appear to be robust enough to help staff understand how to make decisions without using pesticides in the field. And so we've been asked to review that, and we've got some pretty good places to start with. Dubuque, Iowa has a really robust IPM policy that we're looking through. And as a part of our review, what we'd like to do as a committee, what we've talked about, is doing a community engagement process in which we go to the community and we ask kind of the big questions that are talked about in the IPM policy. Some of those big questions include, should the parks be using pesticides? Should we be using pesticides in ball fields, in wetlands, in forested areas, and these kind of things? And so our committee has come to you tonight to ask for some resources and support in doing a community engagement process and plan around IPM. We'd really like to do an equitable engagement process where we go and meet people where they are. Much like the process that was put together for the urban ag plan that I participated in a number of years ago here at the parks. So that's one of our main asks tonight is, in addition to getting some appointments from you, and we look forward to that, also getting some support so that we can go into a community engagement process. I also came to ask you tonight, as I'm hearing more and more from the public, people are asking me, what is the timeline? How soon are the parks going to be off of the use of pesticides? And so what I've come tonight is to ask the board to help set a timeline for ending the use of pesticides in ball fields, golf courses, wetlands, gardens, and natural areas. And once we set that timeline, I believe our committee can really help push ourselves to give you work product that will help the parks indeed make that transition. And then third, planning for spring of 2020, we've been putting together, myself and some members of Be Safe Minneapolis, which is a local organization that's worked closely with the parks. We've been putting together a symposium for spring of 2020 for workers from our Parks Department as well as municipalities around the area. This symposium would be a way to develop culture around not using pesticides in parks. And so this is one of the things that I've come to ask tonight, if the park would be an official partner in this. And I've been talking with the county and the city elected officials, and they're very interested in partnering around a symposium like this as well. So those are the three things that I've come to talk to you about tonight, and I'll turn it over to my co-chair here, Mike Lynch.
President Bourne and commissioners, thank you for having us here to update you on what work our committee has done since we last saw you guys in March. We'll see if we can get our proper slideshow up here, but I can work off our notes. So we wanted to update on what work has been accomplished since March and since April, when we came to talk about our preliminary recommendations to the board for the Pesticide Advisory Committee. Since then, we've reviewed a lot of been in close contact with the park staff on what actual practices are going on the ground all summer long, and they were letting us know what applications were upcoming, which had been accomplished, and they were very, very forthcoming and allowed us to really be good supervisors of what's actually going on the ground. We are reviewing different park properties and creating a list of pesticide-free properties. Right now, it's mostly sites that don't have pools or rec centers or other areas that are legally required to have pesticide applications, but that also excludes the regional parks and the premier athletic fields and golf courses, which have special uses that require pesticides. But we are compiling a list of the specifically pesticide-free, herbicide-free, or insecticide-free parks. And that is in the works, but it kind of changes and depends on what definition we want to put on it, and we're trying to come up with a way to communicate that to the public that's clear and understandable. We're working with staff, and they're modifying practices on the ground as of the summer, doing piloting different techniques of, instead of applying herbicide on poison ivy or parsnip, cordoning off those areas and putting signs up just to keep the public out of those hazardous plants, and we'll go into more detail on that. We're holding the staff accountable. Many of you probably are aware of May 31st, there was an illegal application of a herbicide at Minnehaha Park. And so our committee was very, very direct and forthright, and I called the assistant superintendent that Saturday saying, "What's going on? I hope you are ready to talk to us about what the facts on the ground are." And so we had a very frank discussion on that, and as upset as we were with that it happened, and it directly contravened 5 of the 13 recommendations in the natural areas group, in addition to it just being illegal, we are largely satisfied that the staff has taken measures to mitigate that and prevent that sort of thing from happening in the future. And so, although it was very bad that it happened, we are largely satisfied with the outcome. So we'll talk more about the wild parsnip and poison ivy management, and then public feedback. We have members of the public come to our meetings every session. It's usually a small number. Occasionally we'll have a larger number of people that have something to say, but we definitely receive a lot of feedback, and we would like more because it is a very complicated issue, and it is important that we do receive good, high-quality information from the public so we know what we are following, what the will of the people is. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure.
So one way to avoid using herbicides is to, instead of using herbicides on poisonous plants such as poison ivy and wild parsnip, to find other management strategies in order to keep people away from those and keep people safe. And so with poison ivy, what we've tried this year with great success so far is cordoning off the areas where the poison ivy is with signage and making sure that people can understand that there's poison ivy in that area. And thus far, we haven't had any complaints about that approach. With wild parsnip, we've attempted and been successful with a mowing approach. And so we've got a remote control mowing unit that we can put onto hillsides where we have found some wild parsnip growing in one of our parks, and we treated it that way and didn't use any herbicide. So signage and the use of innovative techniques is getting us past some of the uses of herbicide. And another use of herbicide that the board spoke on and heard a lot about was in our golf courses and in our premier athletic fields. And as the board is aware, we have started a pilot transition for Snelling Golf Course and ball field number 1 at Neiman. And that pilot transition is in conjunction with Minneapolis Parks, who started a pilot at Franklin Middle School. And as you can see here in the image, we've got a picture of the training day, the first training day for our pilot project, where we brought in the world's #1 organic turf transition expert. And he worked directly with our staff that day and is working with them now over the next 3 years for a pilot transition. We have really great luck here because one of our golf managers, Dan Ament out at Snelling, is new with the organization here, but he has experience with growing organically. And so he and the turf transition expert, Chip Osborne, they really hit it off, and staff is now going to be working directly with Chip back and forth on making a plan that will eliminate pesticides from Snelling Golf Course and Neiman Sports Complex, the field number 1 there.
Another area that we're working on and working with the staff on is a rather complicated tool that we are kind of working on figuring out how to use. effectively is the environmental impact quotient. And this is a decision-making tool to help in choosing the least risky of options of chemicals. And so the staff has actually reached out to us and said they were interested in this. And so we recruited and talked to Dr. Paul Koch from the University of Wisconsin. He's a turf grass specialist and plant pathologist and urban ecologist from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who is developing a protocol, a environmental impact quotient system that specifically helps with the turf maintenance. And so the turf grass managers really want to get on this right away because it's going to help them choose the least risky pesticides they use for now in the interim before this organics program comes online system-wide. And so they're actively trying to reduce their risk starting now. It's a shovel-ready way of doing that. It's rather complicated. I can't say that I fully can explain that rather complicated math problem there, but that's what for the University of Wisconsin and Cornell University developed this. And so it is a tool to help cover the various different ways that a pesticide can be toxic and find the least toxic of those options.
Gentlemen, I have to interrupt your report. We have a time-specific item in the planning committee.
Okay.
I'm not sure if folks are signed up to speak, so we might be back to you pretty quick. So, sorry for the interruption. I'm recessing the full board to go into the planning committee, and just a reminder for the record, I'm placing myself in all of Commissioner Severson's appointments this evening.
I'd like to convene the planning committee. Would the secretary please call a roll at 6:32 we are?
Commissioner Meyer,
Present.
Commissioner Vita, President Bourne,
Here.
Vice Chair Cogill,
Here.
Chair Forney.
Here.
You have a quorum.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, December 4th,
So moved.
2019.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, we will be having a public hearing, which is about the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan public hearing. Kate Lamers is going to be presenting first, and when she has done that, we have 3 people who have signed up for open time. And we'll let Kate first make the presentation of, this was on the agenda August?
Chair Forney, correct.
Right.
August 7th, previously, I brought the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan forward.
Right, and then we halted it, and now we're having another. So anyway, go right ahead, please,
Yep,
Kate, sorry.
correct. So thank you, Commissioners. Good evening. I'm Kate Lamers in the Planning Department. So I'm going to be giving you a little bit of background on the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan. This has been before you recently, and I recently gave you a steady update, but just for the benefit of people who are listening, I'll go through the basic information quickly again. So this master plan has gone through somewhat of an unusual trajectory. It was based partly on River First, and so started in sort of 2011, went through a planning phase, and was mostly completed in 2013. Basically, the plan went on hold until a boundary for the regional park could be determined through an Upper Harbor Terminal specific planning process, which was partially completed in 2018 when the city approved a boundary in 2019. With that approval, we brought forward the master plan for completion, including the approved boundary in August. But then at that time, right before actually the public hearing was held, then we learned that maybe we needed to study it a little bit further, and we knew there were some community concerns. So the real update today is really kind of that recent update to the boundary and folding that into the larger master plan. And so this has gone through the typical 45-day comment period, twice in fact, back in 2013 and then again most recently in 2019. So as you know, the Above the Falls is our youngest regional park from Plymouth Avenue basically up to the northern part of the city, but not including North Mississippi Regional Park, and touches several north and northeast neighborhoods. So the River First community engagement was included a larger area than Above the Falls, but was an initiative that was kind of meant to repivot the focus back to this kind of area of forgotten riverfront that was largely inaccessible to the public and had its own community engagement process. And then sort of building on that, the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan incorporated many of those elements and then continued with engagement. And that was in the 2011 to 2013 period. In 2015, the city and the park board started on a collaborative process to try to determine a plan and a boundary based on a plan for the Upper Harbor Terminal development. And as you may remember, we had talked about how there was some uncertainty with how to proceed with a boundary here, and there was a lot of uncertainty based on kind of what was possible and the realization that we needed to look at the Upper Harbor Terminal development as a whole and not have the city advocating for a certain amount of space and the park advocating for a certain amount of space, that the best outcome was going to be to look at kind of what development and park could be together. So that also went through several phases. As you may remember, the city and the park board entered into an exclusive rights agreement with a master developer who assisted with the concept planning, resulting in a draft concept in 2018, and then the city approved concept plan in earlier this year. Outside of the Upper Harbor Terminal, quite a bit of the Above the Falls master plan has continued to move towards implementation. The existing plan was approved in 2000, and so this is the new master plan, but many of the projects remain the same, such as Halls Island, the Shira land site, or the Parcel D, and other projects like Sheridan Memorial Park, 26th Avenue North Overlook. Oops. As you know, we have a process for tabulating, sorry. I thought I had fixed that. So as you know, we have a process for tabulating public comment and to kind of sort commenters' responses into sort of the hierarchy of the level of themes and then sort of the level of impact that the theme has on the master plan, looking at themes that would have minor impact, some things like typos or just wording changes, things that are kind of moderate impact, which is relatively minor things that can be added to the plan, but, would be a significant change from some of the things that the staff had recommended, and high impact themes that would be major changes to the plan. So this explains a little bit better kind of how these themes are categorized. And for our regional park plans with these moderate impact themes, we bring those forward as optional amendments for you to decide on tonight. So one of the earlier high impact themes was the Upper Harbor Terminal Park boundary. Part of the concern among community members was the amount of parkland. And there was some concern that there was too much, but generally more concern that there was too little. But a lot of it, which the red arrows show, was concern about private development between the parkway and the river. And so the continued process was meant to address that. So I showed this alternative B, as we've been calling it, to keep it consistent, to you at a study item about a month ago, which changes the location of some of the private development and the parkway. It maintains 19.5 acres of regional park, which people did not want us to lose, but solves the issue of having private development between the parkway and the river, and gives us a consolidated park space at the end of Dowling, which we believe also will make that park space more accessible to community members. This was done through a process with the Upper Harbor Terminal Community Advisory Committee and also the Above the Falls Community Advisory Committee. The Upper Harbor Terminal Community Advisory Committee, after discussion, formed some recommendations, and these are part of your packet, and I went through them back at the study, but basically preferring alternative B. And this was backed up by both CACs. Also preferred maintaining the parkway between the river and the private development for a number of reasons, but they feel that this is a model that is well established in Minneapolis, and they'd like to maintain that. Recommending that the city and the CPC engage in a larger process to look at an alternative concept, different from the large music venue, and just because that is not on parkland and is not our preview, they wanted to express the interest that the park board is willing to participate in that process because they feel that there are impacts to parkland, and then came up with a list of sort of questions and considerations. And this was part of a larger memo to the city CPC, where the community advisory committees just wanted, I think, the city to be aware of kind of the park-centric lens on some of the developments for the Upper Harbor Terminal. So after this, I know that you have the public hearing tonight. Should this be approved in January by full board, then we would send this documentation over to Met Council for their approval and eventually possibly fully adopt this plan and have the boundary redefined by Met Council. Thank you.
Oh. So I will open up the public hearing. Sorry. And pull out my list here. The first person on the list is Leslie Davis. Leslie, are you here? Oh, great. Come on forward, and I'll give you 2 minutes, or well, I'll give you 3 minutes. We'll be very generous to you tonight. 3. That's okay?
Leslie Davis, a McKinley resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. You know, I made my notes and I said, you in all of this, and you this, and you that. And I said, well, I'm part of this whole thing, so I kind of changed into we. And because I'm part of it, I live in the neighborhood, I live in Minneapolis for many decades, and I'm part of this whole process. So the problem with this Upper Harbor Terminal is, number one, is you can't afford it. You're already having what you're calling a funding gap, which means you're out of money, you know. When you're broke, you can call it whatever you want, but there's not a funding gap. You don't have the money and you can't afford it. And you don't need it because you've got a park right up the road about a mile that is underused. And in my neighborhood, where Farview Park is, very underused. I see the basketball hoop goes unused for numerous hours on many days. And the park, I don't see people walking in it, so we don't need the 19-acre park, and you can't afford it. And I don't know where somebody has the nerve to give you a gift like that when it's public land that's industrial zoned, that's very valuable, that could be sold or used for other things, and the money distributed or given to the people who are having a difficult time with money. So we're talking about taxing the people more to maintain and build a piece of land that we don't even own, and you have no right to that land. I think it was given to you improperly, or hasn't really been given to you yet. So that's point number one. And it's not suitable for a park because you're, on certain days, depending which way the wind is blowing, you're going to get the fine particles and the formaldehyde and other toxic emissions from the gas company. And I know they're installing what they call a thermal oxidizer, but that's not going to do anything for the tons of fine particles that are going to be emitted over the property. So you wouldn't put a park with people and children and everybody going around under the plume coming from this facility. I know they're trying to do something to abate it, but it's not going to help. So the idea of putting housing and a liquor bar and a park in a place where you're going to have the emissions coming from the south, and you can go to a site called weatherstreet.com, and it charts out where the wind direction is going. You'll see even in the next 4 or 5 days, the wind is coming from the south and southeast, and it's permeating the land. And even in the summer, when the bar is operating, you can have thousands of cars coming and emitting formaldehyde and all the other toxic emissions from automobiles. So everything about this whole thing is wrong. It's wrong in you getting it, it's wrong in you operating it, and you can't afford it, and it's just an operation for public urinating drunks to hustle prostitutes. So it's just a bad all-around deal for us, the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Next, I have Mary. It's Mary McGuire here. Oh, welcome, Mary.
Commissioner Bourne, President Bourne and Commissioners. My name's Mary Jamin McGuire. I live in the Marshall Terrace neighborhood, and I'm here representing the Above the Falls Community Advisory Committee. We strongly support Alternative B for the alignment of the River Road along the Mississippi River with the traditional River Road design in the Upper Harbor Terminal. This alignment is critical for public access and to prevent the private ownership of the housing that's planned to separate the public from the river. This is critical not only for the Upper Harbor site, but also for the rest of the Upper River and North Minneapolis as we work to complete the gap in the grand rounds designed to connect us to the rest of the city. Thank you.
Thank you,
We're really
Mary.
excited about this being developed.
Thank you, and thank you for your long stewardship of it as well. Next, we have Bill Schroyer. Is Bill still here? I don't see him in the audience. Excuse me? Oh, okay. Well, was there anybody else who failed to sign up and would like to speak? If not, then I will be closing then the public hearing. Anybody else? Going once? Yes, okay, sorry, I forgot your name already. Oh, Karen, please.
First time I finally made it to one of these, so I didn't know about signing up different places. Again, my name is Karen Peterson. I live at 215 Broadway Street Northeast. And my only comment really is to, I've been very concerned listening to people dropping out of the process out of frustration. People on the north side that were feeling like their voices were not being heard. The thought of finally getting parkland along the river that for decades that we wanted, and then suddenly turning around to sell it to a private entity. So those are the concerns that I have. I think this needs to be given some serious thought, slow down, find a way to make this work for the folks on the north side, for the whole city. But the idea of selling off parkland at this point while we're losing tree canopy and green space and too much impervious surfaces, I think we need to give that some serious thought. So that's just throwing my 2 cents in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anybody else who didn't sign up and would like the opportunity to speak? Okay, going once, going twice? Okay, I am closing then the public hearing. And commissioners, do you have any questions yourselves? Okay, Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. A couple questions. So I know there were some high-profile resignations from the city's committee. Were there, did people step down from the park committee?
Commissioner Meyer, not that I am aware of.
Okay. And then the changes that are going to be made or proposed tonight regard the boundary, correct? Is there more than that that will be passed through committee tonight?
Commissioner Meyer, I think you're talking particularly about the Upper Harbor Terminal.
Yes,
like what is being decided tonight. Yes, for what is being decided tonight in regards to the Upper Harbor Terminal is the boundary, because the boundary is part of the Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan. But there is a separate planning process that is happening for the Upper Harbor Terminal that will determine the park design and the first phase improvements. So.
Right. So the parkway part, like the route that it goes through, is not part of the boundary itself. So, but is that something that is determined tonight, or it will be further planned out later?
Commissioner Meyer, so tonight we are really just determining a boundary. Where that parkway can run is certainly related to the boundary. And so this alternative B, which was kind of the change, allows the parkway to take this course. Exactly how that moves, through the site is, this is very diagrammatic, as you can tell, so that is going to be designed and engineered through the planning processes that are happening right now. So in general, this is kind of fairly standard, which is to have, so if, for example, the parkway were to be behind the development, between the development and the railroad, as far as between the development and the river, then, like, for example, this boundary is not laid out for that. There might be some minor variations in kind of how the parkway works more within the park area or sort of within the boundary, if that answers your question.
Yeah. So something I'd like to have more discussion about, and I think I need to get people together from a few different groups, is about the route that the parkway takes, because there are a couple competing things that people are hoping to achieve. One important thing that Friends of the Mississippi River and AVCAC have pushed for is for there to be a clear delineating line between the private and public property, and in other places the parkway serves that function. But some people from the Bicycle Advisory Committee reached out to me and asked if it would be possible for us to separate the car part of the parkway from the trail part of the parkway, so you could keep the bike and pedestrian trail along the river as is, but separate the motorist use from that so that you don't have as much noise pollution for bikes and pedestrians. So I would like to have some conversations between those three groups to see if we can accomplish both of those goals. Also just wanted to say a few things that were brought up during the hearing. I believe strongly that North and Northeast Minneapolis deserve to have parkways along the entire length of the riverfront. Industrial pollution is a problem. We should solve that by reducing the pollution, not by denying full river access to people in North and Northeast. I've been kind of staying in my lane on the park side of this, but something that comes up a lot during this discussion and does affect us is the city side, because for the amphitheater, for example, they're going to need a lot of bonding money to make that happen, which will compete with other priorities. So I do personally feel that it would be better if there was a smaller music venue, preferably publicly owned, that wasn't taking up as much bonding money. Yeah, that's all my comments on that.
Anybody else? Any other comments to make? I'll just make a few comments. I might have made these in August as well. The Above the Falls Master Plan was approved, I believe it was Met Council, or therefore the legislature, in 2000. And if this comes forward to the board, then in January of 2020, that's 20 years we've been talking about this. And the decision to have this joint effort with the city really is the thing that has made it possible for a boundary to finally be decided on. And I'm so pleased that Mary, who I served on our first Above the Falls committee, that committee, APCAC, is still active, and they are supportive of this boundary. To me, that's very exciting. It has taken us a long haul to get to this. And we're at the end. It's amazing. It really is. And being I was the chair of the phase one Above the Falls project, that's the trails that are just outside of this building and everything, it just really excites me that this is happening. It now is saying to the city, you go your way and we'll go our way. Yes, we will have to collaborate, as we do in so many other things with the city, but now we can do our citizen engagement to define what is going to be happening on this parcel. So it is with great excitement that I ask for all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Hallelujah. And on that, then I will ask for a motion to, wait a second, we didn't even move the resolution. Thank you. I just got too excited there. Okay, would somebody please, first of all, move the resolution?
I'd like to move Resolution 2019-424, resolution approving the 2019 Above the Falls Regional Park Master Plan.
All those in favor this time, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Abstentions? So moved. And I will take a motion then to adjourn the planning committee.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstentions? We are adjourned.
You'll reconvene the regular meeting to continue with our pesticide advisory committee report that I almost forgot to do in the first place. So welcome back, welcome back, gentlemen.
Do you know which one's yours?
I think it's the one on the right.
I think we're on slide 7 when we went to.
Yeah, I left off on the, oops. Green. We left off on the environmental impact quotient. I think we finished, I think I covered that one.
Okay.
So moving on to the integrated pest management policy revisions. So this is an area that we are really digging into. As Russ mentioned, we are starting to look at other templates that are much more robust and cover the issues that the city actually faces. And the 2008 version is clearly out of date and does not meet our needs and doesn't fulfill our goals, doesn't fulfill our actual address the issues that we're trying to reach. And so we really want to overhaul that, and working with the staff to kind of figure out what it should look like. It's going to be fairly comprehensive. So to greatly expand that, we really need to have a good input on what our goals are, what the trade-offs are, what the different options are in crafting a policy like this, because there will be trade-offs. It may be choosing to manage one thing less in order to not use this tool, or it may be using a different tool much, much more so that you don't need to use other tools. And in order to do that, we're going to really need a good, clear picture of what the community actually desires. And that's why we're here today, asking for potentially getting some support, staff support from planning to create a more robust community engagement process, besides just who shows up at our committee meetings, but to actually go out and reach out to the public, to the stakeholders, and get real contextualized information from the public about what their options are, which they prefer, what are the values and goals that they want to put in there. And we want to make sure that we're actually reaching out to a diversity in the city and have an inclusive process, and not just who can show up to a meeting on a Monday night. So we would like to have, that's a bit of an expansion from just our CAC meetings, and we'd like to have that support from the park commissioners to expand that into our CAC process.
One piece of information I wanted to make sure and deliver to the board that's a really great piece of news. After the glyphosate ban, we were given an update from Deputy Superintendent Barrick about the costs that we have incurred after the ban on glyphosate. And turns out it's been neutral. So we haven't spent any more money in management without that glyphosate tool in the toolbox, and that's a really great piece of news. And that was predicted by advocates of eliminating glyphosate. So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, board. That concludes our presentation, and we'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, and thank you for your work and for your presentation. We'll move on to commissioner questions and comments. Commissioner Musich, followed by Meyer.
Thank you, President Bourne. During the presentation, there was a lot of references to we in terms of changing practices, and I'm just curious if those were practices that park board staff changed, or if that was work the pesticide committee was doing in the system.
Looks like a lot of folks are walking to the microphones.
President
And we'll
Bourne,
start with
Commissioner
Assistant
Musich.
Superintendent Barrick.
The we in the statements was park board staff.
Okay.
Staff has been working with the committee, so I believe you're referencing the signage and the mowing.
Yep, and the pilot project at the golf course. I just wanted to verify that we're not asking people that are volunteering for a committee to go out and do work that we're anticipating our staff should be doing, so.
Correct, yes,
Okay.
that is correct. Yep.
Thank you for the clarification, I appreciate that. If you want to stay, Jeremy, I have another question for you. With the cordoning off that we're doing for poison ivy, does that allow that plant then to spread to other areas within that park? And does that spreading then increase the amount of wild space that's now off limits to the public because we're choosing to not actively manage and we're instead just putting signage up and restricting access?
President Bourne, Commissioner Musich, the plant would be, allowed to reproduce on site as it will, whether it's through roots or seed. We continue to monitor it, and that's, this is a new practice for us, so we continue to monitor it. And, if it grows to a point of, compromising or not being acceptable, having a population that's acceptable in terms of risk, then that's when we'll have to make a decision on what is the next step. Is it, going to be some sort of just cutting and continuously cutting it, or other options?
Okay, and are there ways for us to be able to do manual removal that doesn't put our staff at risk of exposure?
Yes, I mean, it would be protective wear, using Tyvek suits to cut, and then there's always that risk of the tools with the oils and stuff like that. We would have to probably beef up our protective wear.
Okay, so we would need to implement potentially a policy direction around how people implement that to be safe, or is that something that you would cover in your policies and procedures at a staff level?
So it would be something we would have to implement with staff. We've already identified that it's a challenge when we hire hundreds of seasonal employees, the training, making them aware of what poison ivy looks like, even full-time staff, newer full-time staff. We've already recognized that there's an opportunity there for us to do more training around wild parsnip and poison ivy and exposure risks. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. I'm pleased to hear that people would like broader engagement beyond just folks that are really passionate about this topic. That seems like it would be sensible for us to do. Is the ask of the committee that further engagement would be done on a broad citywide level prior to looking at changing the integrated pest management policy?
Commissioner Musich, correct that that is the plan, is that we would give something to the public to respond to as a committee and gather feedback on that so that we could hone that before we deliver any recommendations to the board.
Yeah, we want this input to be integral to the development. And so there is a level of us kind of fleshing out what we're asking, but also we want to have that input guiding where we're going with our asks and what options we're developing. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so it might behoove us as like an Operations and Environment Committee to even look at what the charge of the work is that is being done by this committee, because I think when we initially established it, it was to talk about how we reduce the use of glyphosate in the system, right? And what you're talking about now is a much broader scope than what was initially asked of you. So I would think that it'd behoove us to talk about that further as a board. So thank you for sharing your insights and where you see this can go from here. It's been a lot of work, and I appreciate the time you've put into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work that you've done. I have a question about the request. Is the community engagement going to be staff-driven, volunteer-driven? Is it, how much of a financial ask is what I'm getting at? Because we just passed our budget and this wasn't in it.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. President Board, Commissioner Meyer, we are looking at the similar strategies that we use for the Urban Ag Plan, where staff developed a plan in conjunction with the Urban Ag Policy Advisory Committee, and then the Advisory Committee themselves did volunteer work to do the engagement, and we sought extra volunteers from the community to help do that engagement. So it's kind of half and half, development with staff and then engagement through volunteers.
And I'd also just add that the intent for tonight was to share this discussion, kind of plant the seed with the board, get a conversation going so that we could revisit a resolution in the future that, depending on how the conversation goes, what does that resolution do in terms of the scope of the committee? And there would be some work on figuring out scope. Certainly, I've had conversations with Assistant Superintendent Schroeder about this, because I would be leaning on planning for some assistance, and of course, there is a staff and financial implication to that. So wanted to start the conversation tonight, get a read on that. We can then work on a resolution that identifies cost implications and how that would work.
Okay. So the original mandate was just about glyphosate, but it does have the name already for a broader mandate, because I didn't like the very long, complicated name that we had before. But yeah, it's already called the Pesticide Advisory Committee. for me, the top priority is protecting the public from carcinogens and other things that are harmful to people's health. In the case of glyphosate, the World Health Organization had already declared that to be a probable carcinogen. As we consider other pesticides, something I'm going to be looking for is, scientific analysis of what other pesticides are toxic. That's the key thing, is the toxicity, the carcinogens. So I'm not necessarily opposed to pesticides if they're not carcinogenic. I mean, that's something that I'm going to ask others with expertise to help me with. I am concerned about the poison ivy. I think that is something that we should remove and not allow it to reproduce. And then if we go with a broader mandate on this, I think we should probably use the new procedures that we adopted. We adopted new procedures kind of in response to this committee because we had the problem where each commissioner made good appointments on their own, but then we ended up with a committee with people of color on it. So that's something that we should fix if we do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Vita, followed by French.
Thank you, President Bourne. Commissioner French was before me.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for all your work on this committee. I really appreciate it. I'm also concerned about the poison ivy, just growing. I mean, the signs are great, but what about folks with literacy issues or kids that don't necessarily pay attention to signs? So I would love, or can't even read the sign. So I would love to figure out a way for this not to spread all over our parks, especially in spaces that we're encouraging folks to use. You talked about 3 things, Mr. Henry. One of them was the Be Safe Symposium. Was that in collaboration with this Pesticide Advisory Committee, or was that something separate?
No, correct. That's President Board, Commissioner Vita. That is in collaboration with the Pesticide Advisory Committee.
Okay. And you said you spoke with others about how we can all partner on this. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more information about exactly what this is and how this is connected to, this committee's work. At a future time. We don't have to do it now. We can.
Thank you, Commissioner Vita, and I'd be glad to provide some more information about that offline.
Thank you. All right. That's all for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Vita. Commissioner French.
I just want to say thank you and the rest of the committee on the work that you guys done. You have a monumental task that was put in front of you. You talked about a timeline. Does the CAC have a suggested timeline that this board should be following, or we should be looking
President Bourne, Commissioner French, the CAC does not have a suggested timeline.
We haven't discussed a timeline in committee.
Because I would be real interested in what timeline the CAC has, and if to see if it's conducive to what we want to do here.
It's complicated because we have various timelines with the pilot project going organic. That has a more or less, we're kind of looking at something like a 3-year window, and that would be for the first pilot. And then depending on how that goes, if it goes well, we might start other golf courses and athletic fields after that. And so it may be 3 years for that area, and then another couple of years, and then 3 years for the next area. So we haven't really discussed what timelines we're looking at, saying, 5 years from now we'll be pesticide free. It's gonna, we've never actually gone into that. It will be probably depending on what area we're talking about. We'll have multiple timelines.
Okay, and the reason I asked that, because you guys are kind of like the citizen experts, right? You guys are supposed to be advising us. So I would encourage you to go to the CAC and try to figure out, it doesn't have to be something that's finite or set in concrete, but just something so we can look at and say, hey, this is where we want to be at in 2 years, this is where we want to be at in 6 months. It's just a helpful tool, and once again, I want to say thank you guys.
Thank you. President Bourne, Commissioner French, thank you for that recommendation, and I will take that back to our committee, and we will work on timeline.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Commissioner Cogill.
President Bourne.
Oh, excuse me.
Commissioner French. The only thing I would, so for timelines, the original resolution did set a timeline of a 2-year term. And so something to be thinking about is the extension of this committee or extending that timeline and recruiting members. And so there is a timeline set to the committee right now on a 2-year term.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Commissioner Cogill.
Thank you, President Bourne. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the work and wanting to invest in continuing the work. I would love to see this advisory committee continue its work beyond the 2-year time frame. Should there be the interest and the will of the community to invest the time in doing that work. For that reason, I think it's a great idea to have some amount of community engagement and input, and so I appreciate the willingness of folks to spend volunteer time to do that. I do have concerns about what additional staff investment there would be, but I think that we need to explore this and come forward and see what that would be, because regardless of how much or little we can get to make that happen, I think we need to be continuing to bring this forward to the community and get more folks involved. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Cogill. Vice President Hassan.
So let's say we move forward and January 2020 and come up with a resolution to end pesticide, classified use in our park system. It's very harmful and it's not good. The more that we give more time, the more we're risking our kids. And it's our responsibility as a board. I know why we need to extend and do more research. We know that there's enough research out there. There's enough articles to read. I don't know why some of my colleagues wants to extend that, but for staff, what research can we give you to end the use of classified?
President Bourne, Commissioner Hassan, not sure I entirely understand the question. We're still in a moratorium on glyphosate. We have not used glyphosate at all throughout the system in all of 2019. That was an indefinite ban, so it's not going to be lifted. I'm
talking about in the longer term.
Yes, and President Bourne, Vice President Hassan, indeed, while we have eliminated glyphosate from current use in our park system, we're still using very many other pesticides that are of a questionable nature that we would never want our children around. And I don't know a single person who's willing to personally guarantee the products from Monsanto that we're purchasing right now and their safety around kids or people who are suffering from autoimmune disease, cancer, or anything like that. So I very much appreciate your points here, Vice President Hassan, and I will be taking them back to the Pesticide Advisory Committee to let them know what you've advised.
Yeah, like Assistant Superintendent Barrick said, glyphosate itself is banned already in the city. It was banned last year, January 1st, or this year, January 1st. The other different alternative herbicides that have been used in lieu of glyphosate, we are working to reduce the toxicity of what we use, and at the same time, we are working towards reducing them towards zero as per our charge as an advisory committee. So we're doing both at the same time of reducing the toxicity of what we do use and working towards figuring out how to stop using them. Short of just cold turkey, we're going to stop managing poison ivy and noxious weeds and managing turf. We're trying to find a way to make that workable so that we do fulfill the duties of the park system to perform the functions that it is required.
Well, my next question is, do you think it's worth of the community's time to spend another years an answer that we know? Something that we already know that it's risk.
President Bourne, Vice President Hassan, I very much understand and appreciate the direction of your question. As someone who, as you all know, I myself ran for park board citywide, and I had conversations around the city with residents who roundly rejected the notion that we would continue using pesticides in parks. From every single neighborhood in the city where I door knocked and spoke with people, I clearly was given the impression that pesticide use, its time is up in Minneapolis parks and people are ready for a transition away from pesticides. I very much appreciate the direction of your questioning. And again, I would like to reiterate that it would be very helpful if we had some direction from the board around timeline so that, and we can go back and talk, as Commissioner French suggested, to our committee and give you a suggested timeline. But I hear you saying that too soon is not fast enough, and so I appreciate that, and we'll put the spurs to the saddle here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Hassan. Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, President Bourne. A number of times it's been referenced that the committee will now be given direction based on the comments provided by my colleagues this evening. And I'd just like to clarify that the comments of individual commissioners is not equivalent to direction from the board as a body. So while I am very supportive of us taking up what you've brought to us in committee and putting together a resolution that does give you direction, the comments that have been given this evening are not doing that. So I just wanted to clarify that for both of you so that you're aware of how our process needs to work in order for us to make sure that you're getting the guidance you need in a way that represents the will of the body rather than just individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Musich. I want to thank everybody on the committee for the incredible work that they have done to this point. You have a little bit of time left. I'm on the fence as to whether or not to extend the work of the body and the work of the committee. I'll echo some of Vice President Hassan's need for urgency here. Some of the questions around alternatives that we don't know are toxic today give me pause and give me concern. And again, it reminds me of asbestos and the construction lobby. Like there wasn't evidence until there was. And wouldn't we all like to go back and say, you know what, maybe this just doesn't feel right? Tobacco, there wasn't evidence until there was. Vaping, there wasn't evidence until there was, but there's a community of people that remain vigilant to keep people healthy, and I think the work that some of you are doing is right up there. And I think we all know sometimes we get caught in the nomenclature of what's a pesticide and what's not. I think I also heard the will of the community pretty clear. I never hear people, when somebody comes and talks about their recovering bout from cancer, they don't come and talk to this board and they don't come and talk to the community about, well, that technically wasn't a carcinogenic pesticide because there wasn't a label on it yet, so I guess I don't have cancer. Like that doesn't happen. The people that had lung cancer from tobacco use don't say, well, the Surgeon General didn't issue a warning in the 1940s, so I guess cigarettes didn't give me cancer. So I think that there's a preponderance of evidence that some of the stuff that we're doing has a real long-term harmful effect on the people that we're charged with caring for. And we have, again, human beings have kept manicured spaces for thousands of years across cultures. We've only really started using these chemicals that are dubious and not proven to be safe within some of our lifetimes. I think the right solution is the way that the Minneapolis Park Board managed land for the majority of its 130-some year history, and that's through mechanical control and naturally occurring organic mild pesticides, and a change of our expectations. So I am, again, incredibly appreciative of the work that everyone is doing and the thoughtful conversations that are out there. But I don't know, I think we owe it to the people of Minneapolis to do a little bit more than talk and study and talk and study and talk and study and not act. So I would also encourage this Board of Commissioners to give a direct and deliberate timeline for action, respecting the work that the committee is doing and respecting that they do still have some time left on this term, but to relitigate what we've been litigating for the last several years, I think is a real misstep. When I agree with Vice President Hassan that we know what's going on, and everybody on the Pesticide Advisory Committee knows what's going on. And I think we just need to, again, not be afraid to do the right thing, because it's going to be a little harder and it's going to be a little more expensive. So, again, thank you for your work. I would also be to the community outreach around the IPM policy. I'm obviously supportive of that. Again, I would echo, I think we already know what the answer is. The people don't want to play around in poison, and we want to err on the side of caution, and we don't want to find out years from now that something was poison. On the symposium, I think it's an honor to be requested to participate, and I think it's my understanding that there are other bodies of government that are also co-hosting. Mr. Henry, is that correct?
President Bourne, correct. I've been told by the city of Minneapolis that they would like to partner in this as well, and we're looking at the county level as well right now.
Okay, thank you. I would be personally embarrassed if we're not a co-host of a thought-leading conversation like this. I mean, this is part and parcel why we're the best park system in America, is that we take these bold steps and we have these serious conversations and we act instead of study when it's time for action and the time for studying is done. So thank you again for all of your work and for your presentation here this evening. Moving on, I will now recess the full board to go into committees. I think our first committee is legislative and intergovernment.
Time being 7:22, I will call the Legislative and Intergovernmental Committee to order. The Secretary will please take the roll.
President Bourne.
Here.
Vice President Hassan.
Here.
Commissioner French.
Here.
Vice Chair Vita.
Present.
Chair Meyer.
Present.
You have a quorum.
And move the approval of the minutes of November 20th, 2019.
Can we do the agenda first?
I would move the approval of the agenda.
All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Would now move the approval of the minutes of November 20th.
So moved.
All in favor of approving the minutes of Wednesday, November 20th, 2019, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
I'd like to move action.
For the record, I want to abstain.
Are you ready for the next
Aye.
item, Chair Meyer? I'd like to move Resolution 2019-421, caption as follows: a resolution approving a one-year contracts effective January 1st, 2020 with Rice Michaels Walter LLP not to exceed $85,000, and Tom Workman in the amount not to exceed $30,000 for lobbyist services.
Thank you. So this resolution keeps the amount at the same amount it was previously, which is really, I feel quite, I just wanted to thank Council and our lobbyist Rice for that, because it's been a generous amount that you've given these services to us at, especially considering that last year the plan was to have a person in our IGR position, and we didn't have that. There was consideration of amending our budget to add $40,000 to compensate you for that extra work. And it was generously turned down, so we appreciate your willingness to do this work on behalf of the Park Board for such a generous rate. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Seeing none?
Oh, Commissioner Meyer.
President Bourne.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. I'll just full-throated echoing of your sentiments. The generosity of lobbyist Rice this last year has been incredible. I think if he billed us for every hour that he spent working on our behalf, we would have been at least 50% over our budget. So thank you for picking up the slack. I also really want to thank Mr. Workman for picking up the slack and and really carrying a heavy load for us when we had a historic decrease in investment in our intergovernmental and lobbying services. So just thank you, Council Rice. It's been an honor to work. And I'm really glad that our board is really investing in the resources that it needs, and it's not at question anymore. It does not appear to be a question anymore. So thank you, Chair Meyer.
Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Seeing none, all in favor of Resolution 2019-421, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That carries.
I would move resolution for 2019-422, caption as follows: approve resolution approving the 2020 legislative agenda of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board.
Thank you. This resolution keeps our agenda pretty similar to what it was last year. There aren't many major changes. The one big one is that it reflects the bonding priorities that we have previously discussed at other meetings, in particular adding the North Commons regional vision phase to our bonding agenda. Is there any discussion on Resolution 2019-422? Commissioner Vito.
Just a quick question. I know this year it came up about our agenda being listed in order of priority. Is that the same for this year?
I believe it is, yes. Is that, is Pamela, would you like to speak to that?
Chair Meyer, President Warren, Commissioners. Yes, that's why the second year of the biennium is typically the bonding year, and we are fortunate. The November forecast showed a $1.3 billion surplus for the state, and Governor Walz would like to see a large bonding bill, and hopefully the House and Senate will agree to that. That's why the bonding priorities are put first, and then the state funding priorities are second.
And I believe there were a few other very minor changes to the order. For example, local government aid used to always be the highest one after bonding, but LGA has become a smaller amount as we've had more buildings built in Minneapolis. Minneapolis has become more like a suburb in that we have newer buildings, so we don't get as much from that. So that did move down slightly. And the LCCMR funding was put at the top priority there. Aside from that, I don't recall any major changes in the listing.
Thank you.
And Chair Meyer, President Warren, Commissioners, I know Brian worked really hard on the LGA last year, and that was a hard-fought battle to get an increase. So we did see an increase, and that's another reason that it's not at the top.
Commissioner Gordon?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Meyer. I think Council Rice.
Council Rice, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, just a couple things. Your question, Chair Meyer. I worked with Pamela on this, and it's largely different from last year because, as Pamela said, bonding will be a priority this year. And so, obviously, our state funding things are still important. The LGA has kind of moved down in the order because the legislature dealt with it last year and added another $40 million, I think, to the formula. I don't think it's likely that having made that kind of significant change, it'll be an issue that will get revisited this year. It could, but not likely. We'll certainly be watching it and see if there's any opportunity. On the state funding thing, just a note, the legislature is recommending, or we expect that the LCCMR will recommend $1.8 million for the aquatics habitat restoration on the river just outside our window here with the mussel reintroduction. That's a major effect to the above the falls area. Senator Dietzick worked on that, so that we'll be monitoring that, or not monitoring it, we'll be proactively supporting it. We'll certainly be looking at maintaining that commitment that we had last year. I would say we did very well last year in making sure that the multiple funding sources we had did get funded last year. And we will continue to work on the campaign for youth. Representative Knorr has a bill in on that already. We'll renew that effort because there is a surplus to see if we can do more with our summer learn to earn. I know the board's always had that as a priority. We'll also work there may be an opportunity on the full-time community service initiative. There's money in the budget. It's a support item we'd have, but I know that Education Minnesota, other groups are committed to that, so we'd want to be a partner with that. Just as a tease, Dutch Elm, or the Emerald Ash Borer is a big issue. St. Paul is doing what we did 5 years ago and removing their trees. We can maybe expect there'll be efforts on that front too, if there's a surplus. Watching that. All the, skate park funding is something that's come before the board. If there's an opportunity to do that. Senator Dibble has been a big advocate for that in bonding. And then just one other issue I'd like to call the board's attention to. This is a initiative that's come forward. It's on the last page. Again, we'll monitor all these things, but one issue was the issue about liquor licenses at Sculpture Garden, the Commons, and the Boom Island Park. That's an issue that Shane Stenzel has identified, and we talked about it last year. It wasn't quite ready to get on the agenda, but I think it's an issue that we're getting prepared to work on this year, and we would recommend that.
Thank you, Lobbyist Rice, and I saw Pamela raise.
Chair Meyer, President Boren, and Commissioners, just an update on the Elliott Skate Park. We did find out Friday that the Hennepin Youth Sport Grant is awarding $200,000 for that project.
Wonderful.
She said 200.
Commissioner Boren.
Thank you, Chair Meyer. I have a couple of thoughts. I'm largely supportive of the legislative agenda, and I want to thank Chair Meyer for working to put it together. I do just want to remind commissioners that we bring this forward in its draft form to our delegation at our legislative breakfast coming up in January. I know Vice President Hassan and I, and maybe others on the board, and I think Council Rice and some of our staff have had conversations with Representative Newer, who is very interested in dovetailing the Park Board's interests and his community interests around a capital investment in Bryan Coyle Center. I think it's a significantly needed piece of investment, and I would encourage colleagues to put that pretty high towards our list. I was personally disappointed in just the lack of movement we had around legislation for supporting legislation for false or exaggerated 911 calls, which was put on our legislative agenda because of one of the most high-profile incidents the Park Board has had in my 10 years around 911 calls. So I'd really like to make sure that we're looking for that we're proactive, instead of monitoring, that we're proactively looking for members of our delegation to author legislation and doing whatever we possibly can to make sure that that incident never happens again. I feel like we kind of left that sitting. I'm generally supportive of the change in legislation allowing us the authority for liquor sales. I'm a little concerned of what might look like some private enterprise interests that if we're only looking at these specific parks where there are some commercial operators, I think it should be something that we're looking to have the authority to do system-wide. If we're either issuing the permits or we're not, and I would support doing that system-wide. And I'm still supportive of fossil fuel divestment, but I do get a little bit nervous about the Park Board going out of its lane. I think we can be in favor of something along these lines, but it really starts to impact. I want our public employees to be able to invest in the amenities that can best assure their retirement after putting in a lifetime of public service. And so I would be really concerned I would be really concerned about controlling and try to influencing control over how our public employees best receive their retirement. I support I support this, but I think that there is, I think that there are better experts on how to make sure that our lifelong employees have the retirement that they need and deserve. So those are my thoughts until after the legislative breakfast.
Are there any further comments on the agenda? Lobbyist Rice?
If I could make one in response to Commissioner Bourne about the liquor issue. I think your points are well taken, Commissioner Bourne. It was really at my urging that we focus on three ones that were in demand or focus of, and primarily, at least on the Sculpture Garden, was a way to turn that revenue situation around. I think the one thing the board may want to think about is that I know there was some talk about we want liquor everywhere in the park system. I just, even if these three got started initially first, you could, I wouldn't say be inundated, but the board could wind up spending a considerable amount of time looking at requests for people to operate this event or that event, because the way the legislation is drafted, it wouldn't be like a permanent liquor operation there, although it could, but it might be like, okay, we want to do liquor at Boom Island over Memorial Day or Labor Day or the 4th or things like that. So I think it was more of initially a go slow and then evolve it. It would also be unique in that this board would be getting authority from the legislature to do something that we directly haven't done before. In the past, you've done it through City Hall to set it up. So it's an expansion of the power of the park boards that might be bigger than you might think.
Thank you, Lobbyist Rice. I'll just take the opportunity to remind everyone about our legislative breakfast, which will be on Friday, January 17th, 8 to 9 a.m. at the Nicollet Island Inn, where we'll have lengthier discussion about this. And as Commissioner Bourne said, we'll discuss this with the delegation and then bring it back for a final form after that. In regard to fossil fuel divestment, I would just encourage Commissioner Bourne to reread the resolution that we passed previously. The reasons that we passed it were primarily financial in nature. We want to protect our employees' retirement, and we express a sentiment that fossil fuels are a bad financial investment in addition to an unethical one. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, excuse me. All in favor of Resolution 2019-423, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Now is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Now I'll call Jennifer Kiko, roll call for Standards and Conduct Committee.
Commissioner Meyer,
Present.
Commissioner Cogill,
Here.
President Bourne,
Here.
Vice Chair French,
Here.
Chair Hassan.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you.
I would make a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Is this,
So moved.
all those in favor say aye.
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 Any abstention? All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion approved. Is there a motion for the minutes, approval of the minutes?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion has been approved. We have action items.
Vice President Hassan, I would move item 4.1 that the board adopt resolution 2019-423, captioned as follows: a resolution amending the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board rules of the board.
All those in favor say aye. Any discussion? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you. I'd like to request a staff update about this. I'm not sure who that is. Short of the staff? Okay.
Is there anyone?
These were rules that Commissioner Bourne had talked about with executive staff, the superintendent, secretary, and myself. I'm just calling them up. The first one I see related to legal counsel. The question had been, this has already been included in a resolution of the board on legal counsel that says that legal counsel is supposed to review other contracts or give a recommendation. This was passed as part of the budget in 2019, so in December last. In talking with President Bourne, I think he felt the need to refine this, and it was his belief that the board's attorney should be aware of all the legal work that was being done by people with specialized contract needs, so that if the board had a question, probably particularly the board president had a question, he could call, or she could call the attorney up and get an answer about what one law firm was working on. The way this evolved under Superintendent Miller, Superintendent Miller used the PSAs, the professional service agreements, to include the ability to hire legal counsel. President Bourne, when he became president, found that he thought that was a power reserved to the board to hire lawyers, which I think it is under the charter, not the superintendent. So he kind of reeled that in the budget last year to require any legal counsel that are hired by the board, not by the staff or the superintendent, which I think aligns with what the charter says. But what's happened then, to some degree, not entirely, legal counsel gets hired by the Human Resources Department because they want expertise on it. We always don't know what they're doing or why. And so what this would do as a board rule would simply say that whoever the legal counsel is, they would coordinate and oversee ancillary legal work and be fully knowledgeable of work and any associated costs, so that if the board itself or the president of the board wanted an answer on what was going on, your legal counsel would be able to have that. There is obviously an exception, and that would be whoever the legal counsel was. If there was a conflict and they couldn't handle that work, the board would have to have a direct report from the legal counsel. I looked at this. I think it makes sense. I think it aligns with the resolution that passed in 2018 relative to the budget. It's more a matter of, that hasn't, I guess it could happen, but it's more of a directive that President Bourne thought and the rules should be done.
And can you, other staff, speak to what the financial implications of this would be? Like, for example,
yes,
what's passed in the last year, how much it
right. I would say minor. Probably the best example I could give of that was when the board hired the Remley law firm to do the amicus brief for the board, and I had given a different opinion. I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to, and I was more informed as time went on, but the Remley firm also is an excellent firm. They did a great job on it. I did spend some time on that, but not really monitoring what they were doing. It was more they needed my help on framing some fact questions about what the Minneapolis Park Board did and what our purpose would be and some of the other ones. So I would say really not much. I mean, a lot of times I don't even bill for stuff like that. It's just the knowledge of what so-and-so firm is working on this matter. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's less than $1,000 or $2,000 a year. It's really just knowing that people are working on it. If I'm actually doing work, I bill on it. It's more just, hey, this is a heads up. Here's what this firm is working on. Here's what this matter involves, and here's what's happening.
Thank you.
The second question that came up about, well, I think this is really the second issue on Section 23 about the superintendent shall report to the board monthly regarding the work performed since the last report, and then including a report detailing vacancies in authorized position and efforts by the superintendent to fill those vacant positions. Superintendent shall also report to the board monthly on positions being filled on a temporary, detailed, or contractual, or it should say contractual basis, not contractually basis for a period longer than 90 days. This was an issue that the board has wrestled with a bit under President Bourne's presidency to get a report about what happens. Initially, President Bourne wanted this rule to say that if the position hadn't been filled, then the superintendent would have to get authority from the board to fill that. I told him that would be contrary to the charter. We have a thing called the Civil Service Commission and civil service positions. And once the board creates a position that's permanent, it's really beyond the authority of this board to micromanage it. It's even beyond the authority of the superintendent to do it. There are strict rules under the charter and the rules of the charter and the Civil Service Commission that you take these jobs out of the political area and out of the discretionary, even of the superintendent. If you can't keep a person in a position temporarily for more than 6 months. If you do, you're violating civil service rules. A good example of this would be, I know this board has delved in and pulled back the layers of the onion to find out about position. One thing that's come up has been this forestry or multiple forestry positions. But a better example might be what was happening in the Minneapolis Police Department. Minneapolis Police Department's been authorized to have 888 members in it, and it hasn't ever come close to that. They've been sometimes 50 members short. And so the mayor came in and said, give me 14 more positions, and that ignited a big fight in City Hall. Well, wait a minute. They started understanding it. They found out that even if they gave him the 14 positions, he probably couldn't get to 888 in the year 2000. So what they really did is they spent time finding out that the police department was a bit dysfunctional about how they were filling positions and where they were. And they really kind of reverted, it wasn't a genius solution. They went back to the Civil Service Commission and said, look, if you have a position, you have an obligation to fill it, and you can't just start shifting people around. So I think what this was an effort by President Bourne was, and we talked to the superintendent and his staff, was that if the desire is to understand the staffing level of the system, the best way might be for the commissioners to get a report and understand where all your jobs are, what you voted on. You now voted on the budget, which has got, I don't know, Superintendent, 612 permanent positions.
About 600, about 1,200.
Yeah. So you've got, how many of those are filled? Are they part-time? I guess I would compare this rule to be the one similar to what you have on, the board did when Superintendent Miller was doing PSAs. There was a lot of activity going on where that issue got settled. Was the board wanted a monthly report about what the PSAs were out. You get a monthly report on the outstanding PSAs and the amount and the expenditures, so that as trustees or as oversight authority, you at least know what is going on. Now, if you want to delve in further, you could, but on this issue about personnel, I think the board's authority, if you think that something is overstaffed or understaffed, you need to address that in the budget, allocate the money and create the position. If you think that there shouldn't be so many people in this department or that department, you can cut it back, but the board doesn't get to pick the employees, and the board doesn't get to just, if you want to reallocate that, you have to do that through a budget decision. Because the civil service in Minneapolis is designed to take out partisanship, politics, professionalize it, regularize it, and systematize it. So the debate about this issue was, and I've sat here and heard some of the discussion on the board is like, what's going on in the positions? What it would simply do is the superintendent would have to report on, here's the staffing, here's where they're at, are the positions filled or not? Have they been temporarily assigned? I think some commissioners over time have heard from certain employees like, I'm not getting my job, it's not getting filled. This would maybe be a way to put it on paper, and commissioners could actually look at the org chart and say, are these things getting filled or not? And if so, why not? And if people are getting extended beyond the civil service rules, there is a remedy for that. People can complain first to our HR department under the city ordinances and the civil service ordinances. Your first complaint is to the HR saying, so-and-so is in this position and they don't have any legal right to do. And if they don't like the decision of our HR department, they can take appeal to the Civil Service Commission itself. And there's been some high-profile examples of that. I don't know that I need to go into them, but that's happened before internally. If somebody thinks they're not being classified appropriately, or if somebody has a position that they shouldn't have.
Thank you, Councilor Rice. President Bourne.
Thank you, Vice President Hassan. I can give a little bit of context to these as well, but I think Council Rice sums them up pretty well. But I did have some questions around just civil service procedure, and I don't know, I'm guessing Council Rice is probably going to be our most knowledgeable in the room, but is there a scenario between the Is there a scenario where the board as a fiduciary agent, as the body that has fiduciary responsibility over the organization, if they know about civil service violations and willfully ignore them, can we find ourselves in an actionable position?
Chair Meyer, Chair Hassan, Commissioner Bourne. Well, you all take an oath to uphold the Constitution and of the United States, the state, and the charter of the city. And part of that responsibility is the civil service is embedded in the charter. And, unemployment has come up, and so the board appoints the superintendent, the attorney, and the secretary. The superintendent then, by statute, has about 20 or so professionals that he appoints or she appoints, and then the rest of them are, you create civil service positions and say, okay, we're going to have 580 other employees, and they're going to be civil service. Those employees have protections under the charter, under the ordinances of the park board and of the city, and one of them is that they're permanent positions. That's the nature of civil service. There are some exceptions. You can detail a person, you can have a temporary position for 6 months, but after that, and I wouldn't say we're perfect on that. I think there's always a challenge to fill positions. It's probably gotten a little bit harder with this job market, finding the right skills to the right position with the right pay, and you want to keep the work going, but those are the rules, and someone can or could call you on it, and that's one of the things that Ann Walther has done a fair amount of, is looking at the rules, and it doesn't happen all the time, but you might find out a lot about this new rule if it's adopted. And at that point, I would say that, yeah, if you're not knowingly not following the rules, that's a problem. You either got to get the rules changed or do something about it.
Thank you, Council Rice. And your firm typically represents us in civil service cases unless there's a reason for you not to, is that?
Chair Hassan, President Bourne, yes, but also the staff does. I mean, you've got some really good HR people that have worked this and understand the rules quite well, and they're working on it every day, trying to make sure that they're following the rules of the city. And when we actually years ago, we evolved and were given our own human resources department, and it's a good department. There are good people in there, May and Teresa and the other people there. They are probably as expert as anyone on these rules and work with them on a daily basis. So we'll answer questions and work on it, but a lot of, I would say, it goes to another question. Most organizations this size would spend maybe 2% of their budget on legal fees. You're not anywhere close to that. You're not even close to 1%. And we tend to take a fairly light touch because you do have really good people in HR, you got good people in planning. That's, all the better. The less you spend on lawyers, the more you can spend on other higher priority things.
That was a good plug, Council Rice, at the
including landscape architects.
So to Commissioner Meyer's question and just where these are brought forward. I think we covered the legal one pretty well. I will say in my own experience as the president over the last 2 years, I wouldn't wish this particular experience on pretty much anybody else. It's being the liaison to the board, not knowing which attorney to call when we are in litigation is, for again, a part-time office, is really challenging. And there were some initial, with no disrespect to counsel, there were some initial calls with some initial litigation when, and some initial legal issues when I was first elected president, that, with all due respect to counsel, neither one of us could find an immediate answer as to what attorneys were representing us in what field. So I think this is a good practice to at least make sure that we have one lawyer, and that lawyer at least just knows what all of our other supplemental lawyers are doing, and can have, our lawyer should be the person we go to if we have to have a conversation with our supplemental lawyer, and probably not through staff. And then just the last one on vacancies, I think are high-profile issues of, in the last 6 years, having one management level position vacant for at least 6 years in the budget is a really good example of why the board needs to have some, at least, knowledge on this. We had some other high-profile cases in the budget this year where we had folks detailed for 3 years into a position, and some pretty, I'm really proud of the superintendent, Superintendent Bangora, for closing those gaps right away and looked at all those vacant positions and said, this one, like, it's just a piece of honest budgeting. That said, I want us to govern and set rules around best practices and not around personalities. I impeccably trust Superintendent Bangora from his year at the helm that he's on top of this issue and staff is following that. I don't know what will happen 6 years down the road or 10 years down the road, and I think that this is a good practice as the body of people that are ultimately responsible for this. So that's the genesis of the rules that were brought forward. So thank you, Vice President Hassan.
Seeing none, I'll move a motion to adjourn the meeting.
You have to take a vote on this.
Oh. All those in favor, should we take a roll call?
I'd request a roll call on 2019-423.
Jennifer, will you call roll call?
Commissioner Meyer,
Abstain.
Commissioner Cogill,
Aye.
President Bourne,
Aye.
Vice Chair French,
Aye.
Chair Hassan.
Aye.
You have 4 ayes, 1 abstain.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? Seeing none, the motion has been approved.
The time being 7:58, I would like to call to order the Administration and Finance Committee. Will the Secretary please take the roll? Commissioner French,
Here.
President Bourne,
Here.
Vice President Hassan,
Here.
Vice Chair Cogill,
Present.
Chair Vita. Present. You have a quorum.
I would entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor of approval of the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes.
Chair Vita, you have no minutes, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
I would entertain a motion to, for Resolution 2019-425, captioned as follows: a resolution approving an agreement with ICM 7 Mill Place LP ICM to allow the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to capture rainwater for reuse in the Waterworks project from the Barrel House and the Engine House properties located at 111 3rd Avenue South and 333 1st Street South, Minneapolis.
Any discussion? Commissioner Cogill?
Thank you, Chair Vita. I just want to say I'm glad to see that this has been worked out and that it's moving forward. It's a great part of the Waterworks project, and it's kind of actually a critical part of it, and very excited to see it happening and being that next step so that sooner rather than later, we can get this spot open and get the sous chef in there.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Resolution 2019-425, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes.
I'll move Resolution 2019-426, a resolution consenting to pursuant to Section 5.2 of the lease agreement with the Lopet Foundation Mill Valley Kitchen as the sublessee and subtenant of the Lopet Foundation at Theodore Wirth Regional Park within the Adventure Welcome Center building.
Any discussion? Commissioner Bourne?
Thank you. I would move to table Resolution 2019-426.
All those in favor of tabling?
I'd ask for a
Oh,
roll call.
sorry. I would ask for a motion to, sorry.
Just have a question.
Okay.
Could President Bourne explain his reasoning for tabling?
Point of order, a motion to table is not debatable.
Okay, so, all those in favor?
Roll call. You request a roll call.
You requested a roll call? Is that what you said? Okay. To table Resolution 2019-426.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
President Bourne.
Yes.
Vice President Hassan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Cogill.
Aye.
Chair Vita.
No.
You have 4 ayes, 1 nay.
The motion is tabled.
I would move Resolution 2019-427, caption as follows: a resolution amending Chapter 17 to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board Code of Ordinances, criteria-based system for capital and rehabilitation, neighborhood parks, project scheduling, in conjunction with Chapter 16-20, 20-year neighborhood park plan.
Any discussion? All those, seeing none, all those in favor of resolution?
Here, a point of
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Musich.
Thank you, Chair Vita. I'm not on this committee, but I appreciate being given the opportunity to speak. I'm just wondering if someone can explain to me the rationale for updating this chapter of our ordinances to remove the sentence, "This ordered ranking will be used to determine equitable distribution of capital and rehabilitation funding on a rolling basis for the 20-year neighborhood park plan beginning 2017 and ending in 2036. Is there anyone in the room that knows why that is being suggested for removal?
Chair Vita, I drafted the language change. I'd be happy to speak to it.
Please do.
Thank you, Chair Vita. Commissioner Musich, this resolution in part came up through your questions and concerns brought up during the budget. There was clearly some differences of opinion over this board's ability to govern itself. I don't want to speak for you, but what I remember your concerns were being was that your interpretation of that part of the ordinance prohibited the Minneapolis Park Board from adopting its own CIP. After consultation with council, council had suggested that no previous ordinance can bind the hands of a current governing body. And to clarify some confusion around this and to make sure that that the recommendation coming from staff, in particular around undeveloped parks, is exactly that, a recommendation. But it's the Board of Commissioners that have final authority on the CIP. Further consultation with council, if I remember right, and I will defer to him, was that this ordinance is a standalone ordinance from NPP 20, and that the Board of Commissioners does have the ability to amend this ordinance without a concurrent change from the City Council. And I would defer to council to make sure that my understanding of that is correct.
Madam Chair, yeah, you're correct. This is, the NPP 20 is encapsulated in Park Board Chapter 16. 17 was outgrowth of NPP 20, but it's separate. It's not a joint ordinance with the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Rice. I believe Commissioner Musich had also brought up some concerns around.
I don't need any additional information, thank you.
Thank you. I have the floor. I believe Commissioner Musich had also brought up some concerns around potential litigation from community members in the last meeting. So I think that this clarifies what the board's intent is on what could potentially be a confusing item in our ordinance and provide some clarification.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourne. Any further discussion? All those in favor of resolution?
I'd request a roll call.
Thank you. All those in favor of resolution 2019? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still talking. Roll call, please.
Commissioner French.
Pass.
President Bourne.
Aye.
Vice President Hassan.
Aye.
Chair Cogill.
Aye.
Sorry, Vice Chair Cogill. Chair Vita.
No.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
You have 4 ayes, 1 nay.
Thank you, Chair Vita. I would move Resolution 2019-428, approving change order number 3 with this, with standard contracting, contract COM 1014, for shoreline enhancements and stormwater outfall repairs at Lake Nokomis Regional Park in the amount of $59,486.33, for a new contract total of $525,112.94, and approving the allocation of $5,802.46 from the MPRV Regional Park Operations and Maintenance Fund to cover the cost for rehabilitation of storm sewer infrastructure.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of resolution 2019-428, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes.
Thank you, Chair Vita. I'd move Resolution 2019-429, accepting Capital Grant Improvement Award Amendment Number 1 from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, extending the grant deadline for the design and construction of innovative stormwater management practices as part of the Waterworks mezzanine phase construction.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of resolution 2019-429, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes. We have a study report item, the 2019 employee survey. That I'm super excited to hear about.
Chair Vita, just in the interest of time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, and we can bring this up in a committee of the whole at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The motion passes. Sorry. Wow. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
You are.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's to Chair.
It's to me for the Operations and Environment Committee. The time being 8:07 PM. I will call the Operations and Environment Committee to order. Secretary Ringgold, if you could please call the roll whenever you're ready.
President Bourne.
Here.
Commissioner Cogill.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer. Vice Chair French.
Here.
Chair Musich.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Objections, abstentions? That motion carries. I would also entertain a motion to approve the minutes of November 20th, 2019. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Objections, abstentions? That motion carries. This evening, we have a study report item on park natural and naturalized areas. We are joined by Marshall Holmberg, our Natural Resources Coordinator. Thank you so much for being here and sticking with us so late at night. We appreciate it.
Chair Musich and Environment and Ops Committee. I'm here this evening to talk about park natural and naturalized areas and to give a brief introduction to what we're doing in our park system regarding these types of areas. I'd like to start by just doing a couple of definitions to everybody just for the purposes of the presentation so we're clear on what we're talking about. Park natural areas are areas that are not planted. We have a study going on currently with Applied Ecological Services, the Natural Areas Study. I and the contractor came in May and did a presentation to the Ops and Environment Committee about this. They are in the process of completing the study, which will be done in 2020. They are looking at our natural areas, the naturally occurring plant communities that are out there in the park system. They have determined that most of the natural areas are forested, 940 of the 1,162 acres. The graphics here kind of show the makeup of the different types of plant communities and the quality assessment that was developed for this project. Another definition they like to have out there and clarify is naturalized areas. In the past, the park board had some areas that they converted, and these were intentional projects to convert land from one vegetation type to another. And most frequently, this was done from using turf and turning into prairie. One of the great examples for that is the Cedar Lake Regional Bike Trail pictured here. This is an old railroad grade, and it was turned into a tall grass prairie surrounding the bike and walking trails. There are other types of land cover out there in naturalized type areas, and these are areas that I would just kind of call they're naturalizing. They're turning into something else on their own. These types of vegetation cover types can be caused by different things happening in our park system. We're seeing a lot of flooding around Lake Nokomis. We have what was once a turf area now turning into a cattail stand or standing water. It can happen due to that type of situation, or if for some reason mowing is stopped, like we've had stumps and we stop mowing, it turns into something other than what was maybe once a mowed turf area. And unforeseen changes. We had a tornado up in North Minneapolis. This is a picture of parts of North Mississippi, and this is an uprooted stump with vines on it. Just other things happen out there that we don't necessarily plan for. Just going over the roles that staff have in management, I'm the Natural Resources Work Unit, and we manage the planted prairies that were part of the redesign or conversion efforts that were done from the 1990s to the present. I also manage the remnant plant communities, and by remnant we mean like higher quality native plant communities that are like the Savannah at 36th Street and the Rust River Parkway. Forestry has involvement in these different areas with tree removals and plantings, and our asset management staff work on mowing and upkeep of areas with kind of rough cut mowers and many of the naturalizing and natural areas to control woody and invasive species. We do that type of mowing like at Minnehaha Glen, Savannah. We've done it also at Worth Park. We also use volunteers extensively. Myself and Sherry Brooks, the volunteer coordinator, work with a lot of volunteer groups. We have about 13 stewardship groups, and we have just groups calling and wanting a project working in natural areas or working on native plantings. We've done plantings with volunteers after invasive removal most frequently. We've done them in woodland areas, we've done them in prairie savanna areas, and currently there's a new project that we're just involved with, just starting this fall. We're partnering with the University of Minnesota for Cover It Up. It's a research project that they're doing to, when we remove buckthorn, putting in plants to give some competition to the buckthorn seedlings that could come up. In any of these cases, it's significant long-term commitments to maintaining the area that means success. We are not working with a system that has native soils. We have a lot of altered soils here. For instance, the Cedar Lake Regional Trail was old railroad grade. There's concrete debris around Cedar Lake and in Minnehaha Park, large, huge chunks of concrete that are part of the landscape, and it makes it difficult to do a restoration or enhancements in these types of areas. Invasive species are everywhere. They're coming, there are others coming in the future, and they're coming from private properties into parklands. So we have limited, control over private property. And we do need to be cognizant of the fact that once the invasive species have been here, some of these plants have seed viability for up to 20 years in the soil. So as long as the plant's grown for a while and seeded and dropped the seeds, those seeds could be viable to be sprouting new plants for up to 20 years in some cases. In any event, any of these types of areas, with the exception of the other, we are documenting in ViewWorks, which is our asset management software. This project, I believe, has been going on for a couple of years. This shows the area at Lake Nokomis near Cedar Avenue and Nokomis Parkway. It shows different types of vegetation areas. There's the stormwater pond, gateway pond down there. The green shaded area is mowed turf, which also right now has cattails growing in it due to the flooding. And the reduced mow area, which is underneath oaks on the slopes of that park. This ViewWorks is an asset management software program that does assigns work to staff and also can be used as a communication tool. Like our customer service staff look at this and try to figure out who's responsible for what area, what type of management is being done in there. It's a communication tool ultimately for the public as well. In many of our plans, we talk about natural areas and naturalized areas in park plans. Master planning talks about this, our ecosystems plan, and then our natural areas plan is working on the naturally occurring areas and what we have out there, the forested areas mainly, as I referred to before. In each of these plans, there's a community desire to have more naturalized areas. Different plans refer to different types of natural areas in different ways. Like the ecosystem plan talks about wilding, and it talks about prairies and some bee lawns. The Nokomis Hiawatha Master Plan has native plantings, wildlife habitat, and naturalized uplands mentioned. And it is a community desire to have this, but as mentioned previously, resources to maintain these areas, and that is not just money, but it's people who can go out and identify plants and know what to do to continue to maintain these areas, is very much a key component to having success. And it's a long-term maintenance of these areas. For instance, the North Mississippi Regional Park Prairie that was planted around the Cronin Interpretive Center was installed probably in the early 2000s. We are still working to maintain that so it doesn't turn into a bed of weeds, noxious weeds that we don't want there. Also putting the monkey wrench in the mix is our changing climate. We're seeing larger storm events more frequently. We need to anticipate for what that will cause for park areas. The big slump at the River Gorge in Franklin that happened a few years ago is evidence of that. I was at a meeting recently where they're talking more and more about that type of thing happening in addition to like flooding and the causes of the effects of these big swings in the climate. So, you know, invasive species, again, we don't know what's going to be coming. Someone called me and said, I think you have kudzu at Minneapolis Park. And it wasn't, but I did look on the website for the USDA, and it is found in Iowa and pretty close by. So that's a legitimate type of concern that plants can be moving into this area as the climate is changing. So we don't know what will happen yet with that. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
The kudzu,
Commissioner French.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, Commissioner French.
The kudzu?
The kudzu, you said
Yeah.
it was found in Iowa. Isn't it too cold for kudzu to grow in
Well,
Minnesota?
yeah, that's kind of the thing about the climate change. We are seeing more insects and invasive species that we felt that way about have the potential to move up here if we have continuing mild
Kudzu's
winters.
devastated parts of the South.
It has.
It takes over everything.
It's bad,
so.
yes. And we actually have Oriental bittersweet, which in some ways is similar. It will grow over trees and kind of pull them down. So that's another invasive that I'm dealing with
Real
right now.
concerning to me. So thank you.
That's okay. I hope I'm giving that information out correctly, I did not extensively look at the report from neighboring states. Mhm.
I did a study on kudzu when I was like a 6th grader.
Uh-oh. And you lived to tell the tale. It didn't grow over you.
I've never actually seen it in person, but I've seen pictures. and
Yeah,
video of it.
it's intense.
It's
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful. I just wanted to make the quick comment that I hope we can expand our no-mow areas and see more naturalized areas in those spaces, especially as, former Representative Khan keeps saying, like around here at headquarters and along the river. And that's something I'd definitely like to see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Seeing no further questions, I have a couple.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was helpful. With the areas that we have that are naturalizing themselves, where we don't have a choice and we're not making the conscious decision to stop mowing, it seems to me, observing the plant populations that are establishing themselves, that it's pretty lacking of diversity. So is there an opportunity for us, or should we be thinking about ways that we could be supplementing the plants that are occurring in those naturally occurring naturalized areas so that they can be of higher ecological value to the system as a whole?
It's an excellent question. I would say that in these naturalizing areas, the problem being that they are filling in with invasive species. For instance, the areas at Lake Nokomis, initially when the flooding started, there were some native plants and their native wetland plants that were coming up. Now it's all hybrid cattail is the dominant plant type. In areas that are, where we've had problems in the past is like we'll have a stump like at Bassett's Creek Park and we'll stop mowing, or a reduced mow area doesn't get mowed. What will happen is the buckthorn fills in. So that is a problem, and unfortunately introducing a more high diversity of plants is a good idea. That controlling the invasives is a hard task to take on in these areas.
So essentially, if we were going to have that be a highly valuable ecological space, we would need to remove the current vegetation and start over with a restoration project?
Most likely.
Okay.
Given what we have, how the process has been going.
Okay.
And they can turn very, very quickly into invasive species dominated areas,
Okay.
sadly.
Yeah. Seeing no additional questions, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? That motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
That's it. That's it, right? Full board.
We've missed a president and a vice president to reconvene us.
We are. I will reconvene the meeting of the regular meeting and move to petitions and communications. Commissioner Musich.
I will pass.
Commissioner Forney.
Petitions and communications.
What?
We're in petitions and
Oh, pass.
communications.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear.
Commissioner French.
I just want to say thank you to Commissioner Bourne for the last 2 years of service. You led a new board with six new commissioners, and I thought you did a pretty good job. You made some commitments to the youth of the city. You made some commitments to areas of the city that have been traditionally ignored or disenfranchised. So I really want to say thank you. It's been an honor to serve with you, and I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you. Commissioner Kogel.
Thank you, President Bourne. I want to echo Commissioner French's sentiments. Thank you very much for your leadership over the last 2 years. I have learned, and I think all of our board members have learned so much from you. The thing that I'd say I've learned more than anything is though not everything that is faced can be changed. You can't change anything without facing it first. And time and again, you have shown that you're willing to take those stands on really important issues surrounding justice. At a time when at the national level and state level, we are still seeing people hedge our investments in youth, you have stood strongly, along with my fellow commissioners, to say that if not us, then who? And to continue that fight. And I hope that this board will continue to do that in the coming years, acknowledging the fact that everybody has a place in saying that every child is worth investment. So I thank you for that. And I also wanted to say I was hoping that we'd do a round of applause. I know no one's here anymore, but I still want to say thank you very much for your service. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Kogel. Commissioner Meyer.
Pass.
Commissioner Vita.
Pass.
Vice President Hassan.
Thank you, President Bourne, and I will echo what Commissioner Lundell and Commissioner John said about you, and if people try to hide the truth, I'll take them, it's up to them. But it was a great honor serving with you as a vice president, and I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure this board have learned a lot. And even though it's challenges, coming in as a first-time elected official, even though we came here as with no superintendent, there were some tough challenges ahead of us, and just won in 2018, and not knowing who will be the superintendent, or not knowing who to appoint that job. You were the one that went out of your way to find someone who contributed to this park system, someone that will never be forgotten. And you were part of that legacy that will always stay in this park system, naming the headquarters as Mary Merrill. No one in this park would ever thought about, naming someone who contributed to this park system for a long time. That was worth naming for. And it has been an honor, and I know that this is not the end of it. You're still going to be, you'll be sticking with us. I know just like you supported us, you will continue, and I hope you do. I'm not just saying it. And the only thing I'll say is that I'm sure we wouldn't be accomplishing things that we accomplished without your support, without your guidance, and I hope the next president works with you and gets your learns from you and prioritize youth just like you did. Even though you tried to invest in youth and you did in your 2020 budget, some colleagues, went around and find things to go after the Somali community, but the fight is now over. And the community are coming back here. They've been denied so many times, and the Minneapolis Park Board, I will say, privilege that, has always been ignoring minorities and people of color. And now that we're here, we have a voice. Still yet, there's colleagues that still believe that some communities don't deserve their fair share. But that work continues. And I'm not afraid to fight for the voiceless across the city of Minneapolis. And thank you so much. I mean, I can talk about you the whole night, 12 hours. But I hope you continue supporting the park system that you value, that we all value, that we all care about, and the staff keep up the good work. And I can't wait to see what's there for you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President Hassan. I'll be brief. I already made a report in petitions and, under reports of officers. Council Rice might not like this, but I think I'm going to quote Mayor Ryback, and this duck's not done quacking, and there's a lot of work to do. And just for your kind words, praise of the praiseworthy is the highest honor. I owe each and every one of you a debt of gratitude. The work that we've done this year, we could not have accomplished without every single one of you contributing in your own ways. There's a lot of things that we accomplished this year that we tried for a decade before to accomplish, and it didn't happen until these human beings were sitting in these seats. Even when there have been some disagreements, we've done some incredible things, and I'm proud of that work. And praise of the praiseworthy is the highest honor. So thank you all. Seeing no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned.
Wow.
Oh, the Phyllis Wheatley thing.
4 weeks in a row, man.
We approved that.
Oh,
was at the
yeah,
full
sorry.
board.
Okay, yeah, we got it. Never mind. Yeah, that was the full board.
Oh, that's wrestling, man. 4 weeks in a row, man. Miss wrestling on Wednesday night live, man.
Yeah, well, so you got a long break.
I got DVR, but it's not the same, man.
DVR, like Dance Resolution?
No, I have a DVR to watch wrestling. Wrestling AEW comes on Wednesday
You have
nights,
some interesting.
and I don't get to watch it because I serve the city of Minneapolis.
Thank you, guys.
Good, man. I would have said more, but slips no more.